Good morning, everyone. My name is Carlos Calhar Jorge, and as the chair of the Project Steering Committee, it's my great pleasure to welcome you here in person and those that are online. This is the meeting that formally closed the EuMAR project, as it's clear, a co-funded project by EU, and the co-funding is important because ESHRE has also funded a lot. Just a few words to start, to set the scene. Of course, it's futile to refer the extreme importance of good health registries and detailed ones. It's the real-world data that can contribute to scientific development, well-informed political decisions, and, of course, above all, to improve the patient care and the outcomes, desired outcomes. In ART, now MAR field registry started in the 80s. They are now well developed across all regions in the world. I'm afraid Europe is the only one without a detailed registry system, in contrast with Latin America, United States, Australia, New Zealand, and even Africa. In spite of many efforts in the last more than 20 years, the EIM work, we until now can only gather aggregate data and not individual cycles data, which of course limits a lot all the results of studies that we can perform. Aggregate data in the world of registries, we can think about an iceberg. Aggregate is just the tip of the iceberg. Aggregate data, with aggregate data, it's impossible to calculate, for instance, cumulative results of treatments and get information about the mobility across Europe. And I have now one slide to show you that. This mosaic is the current status, current situation in the member states of EU about the different registry systems or the absence of registry. And is against this background that EuMAR were designed to fill the gap, to try to fill the gap. And I must say that I think that the opening of a call to project in this area represents a clear statement from the EU DG Santé on the importance of developing an European integrated and detailed registry. Unfortunately, we are not sure of getting more funds for the future, but at least it's a clear statement. As it will become clear during the presentations, we had 3 years of very challenging and stimulating work. And for now, just to complete my 5 minutes, I would like to acknowledge the fantastic job of the colleagues that integrated the work package groups, and of course, above all, their leaders that you will hear today, and also to pay tribute to the members of the ESHRE Central Office staff that worked for EuMAR with a superb commitment and fantastic quality. And you can see those lovely smiles that mirror their mood when working in the project. All of them, of course, allowed to settle the foundations for the future, for what we are certain will become a pan-European registry. last but not least, a very special word to ESHRE in general, because ESHRE owned EIM since the beginning and is now supporting and will continue to support financially the implications of the project. Without that support, it was impossible to have some perspective of developing such a registry. So along this day, achievements, challenges, and future perspectives will be addressed, and I hope that at the end of the day, all will leave not only informed, but also enthusiastic or inspired to go deeper in collaboration in the future of this initiative and this so needed registry. So thank you very much, and again, welcome. And let's move to the first session that I have the pleasure to chair. And it's about the origins, so it's more informative, and we have not planned a discussion time, but of course all questions will be addressed after the in the discussion time after session 2. And again, I'm very happy to be here and to see all of you and your interest. Now moving to this part of the room, and asking Christian de Geiter to address the first topic, original goals, rational and policy context. Of course, all of you know Christian is one of the main pieces of our project. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. My first talk is to convince you about the value of registration, and I would like to dwell a little bit longer on that. Why do we need a registry? An IVF clinic is a complicated system. It is a collaboration of professionals with different backgrounds, clinicians, nurses, embryologists, psychologists, and they all have to be dedicated and adhere to the standards, not only on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, but also on a yearly basis. And all of them are embedded in the daily work, confronted with daily questions, and their dedication has to remain on the same level. So it is important, at least for the head of each clinic, to have at regular times overview of what is being done, the results that are being achieved. And this is the basis of statistics that are supposed to be done nowadays in each clinic. But the value of those statistics can only be appreciated if they can be compared with the statistics of other clinics or of the group of other clinics within the same country working under the same legislation. And that's the value of national registries. It gives additional flavor to the statistics of the individual clinic in being able to compare them with the controls of all the other clinics in the same country. But again, that is limited because some countries are quite small. Some countries have different legislations than the others. And lawmakers also have to see whether their legislation, either restrictive or not, really allows accessibility to the treatment. And that is the purpose of international registries, in which the data of the national registries are put together and can be compared with other countries. Also providing enough data to assess accessibility, effectiveness, and overall also safety in view of sometimes rare complications caused by the treatments being done. So this is the rationale behind installing registries. A registry is also something that has to be set in perspective to the golden standard in proving effectiveness of a treatment, that is the randomized clinical trial. Randomized clinical trials are hugely expensive, have to be designed such that a particular population is selected in order to prove the effectiveness of a treatment. But randomized clinical trials are not often reflect real-world use, or I always call this wild-type IVF, that may be very different from the original setting of a randomized clinical trial. And here comes in the value of a registry. A registry can evaluate the effectiveness and also the complication rate of a treatment, perhaps proven by a randomized clinical trial, but then used in a real-world setting. And the randomized clinical trial, also because of the complexity of the setting, is limited to a small group of patients. And a registry allows the evaluation of the value of each treatment component in a large setting with large patients' cohorts and over prolonged time periods. So the extended period of observation in large cohorts also allows for the identification of very rare complications that perhaps cannot be identified within the frame of a randomized controlled trials. And here we come into the realm of surveillance and vigilance. So registries, national but even more international registries, allow surveillance and vigilance over prolonged time periods, and can also allow and permit a benchmark so that errors of false decisions or wrong developments can be corrected over time. I will give you an example in a few slides. There are a number of challenges associated with running an international registry. Europe has many countries with different languages, different social backgrounds, different political landscapes. So comparing data from one country to another can be challenging. Also, the setting by which each country collects the data, as Carlos has shown previously, cycle by cycle, aggregated data, voluntary or mandatory, can be very different, and also the software systems, if any, that are being used, make it difficult for international registry to collect the data. Also, the problem of non-mandatory aggregated data also opens the window of omitting cycles, so that is what really what is submitted to the registry may be different to what is being done in reality in a clinic. And our treatments change over time. Cross-sectional data sets in the past have been very valuable, but now treatments go beyond the time limit of 1 year, so that sequential treatments now must be registered also in an international registry. We, luckily, in Europe, in the sake of ESHRE, was installed many years ago, the European IVF Monitoring Consortium, that has been collecting aggregated data from European countries, also beyond the European Union, in which the quantity, the availability, efficacy, safety, quality, and also timely trends were registered over decades by analyzing annual cross-sectional data sets. And as you can see here, the number of techniques has expanded over time. These are the treatments that are being analyzed within the frame of the There are, it's the largest European registry, and I think until 1 or 2 years ago, it was the largest global registry on ART. The countries, the challenges are that the aggregated data sets come in with a large delay. We just published a short time ago the latest data set of 2020. So we have a delay of 5 years. So we always come in with our annual reports with some delay. And the problem is that the data collection is still voluntary in 12 countries as compared to 23 countries that have a mandatory registration. But the EM has thrived very well, and we have now a completeness of the data sets of more than 90% since several years. And the EM has been instrumental in improving our care to the patients. In the 90s, a multiple pregnancy was considered an inevitable complication of ART. Twins and triplet pregnancies were recorded in a high proportion of pregnancies achieved. And by being confronted every year with these figures and with the options by which this can be reduced, we have been able to nearly annihilate high-order multiple pregnancies in recent years, but also to induce a significant reduction of the number of twin pregnancies. I think this is an achievement in which the EM Data Consortium has been instrumental. But our treatment modalities are changing. In the early days, until about 10 years ago, a treatment has started on a day, and about 4 to 6 weeks later, a pregnancy was done that could result either positive or negative. Now, a treatment is being carried out with the deliberate plan to divide the treatment into timely sequences that may span more than 1 year or even several years. So the cross-sectional annual data sets that we are analyzing within the frame of EM is not really representative anymore of what is being done truly. And in the second graph, you see here the relationship between the number of embryo transfers in the fresh cycle and in the frozen cycle. And in the 2020 report, for the first time, more embryo transfers were done in thawing cycles than in the fresh cycles. This is a trend that probably will continue, also because of the more frequent adoption of the freeze-all policy, which is nearly reaching 20% in 2020. So the setting in which we carry out treatment but also want to register them is changing, so that we have to change also and adapt our policy in registering them. We have to go from a summary data level to a prospective cycle-by-cycle registration in which we set a deadline in which the initiation of a treatment is to be registered, so that treatments cannot be omitted anymore from the statistics. We have to move from a retrospective analysis of aggregated data sets to a prospective one, so that we can also link together treatments over time. And we also have to move from a voluntary registration within Europe to a compulsory registration, because this is the surveillance and vigilance is now part of medical care. And that's where EuMAR comes in. So the EuMAR wants to raise the standard of an international registry. And that can only be done by unifying the semantics Europe-wide, so that the same thing is the same topic is labeled with the same term throughout Europe, despite different languages, in which we have to move from an aggregated data collection to a prospective cycle-by-cycle registry, in which can we link together segments of treatments done at different time points together, so that we can see the flow of the sequential treatments. And we also have to organize the IT system such that we can adapt the international registry to the existence of national registries, to the data flow that is already in place in many countries, but not in all, and also that requires the needs of all stakeholders, which also includes the patients. The patients should know about the registration, and we should also convince the patients that this is a good thing to do. And that's what the EuMAR project is all about. The aim of the project here, you can read as it is written there. It's an overarching, standardized web-based data registry. We want to collect high-quality data in a prospective fashion, cycle by cycle, in which the data is the treatment is registered at the onset of the treatment, so that we can follow the outline of the treatment and also the outcome in a timely fashion. The project EuMAR was financed by ESHRE, but also by the European Committee. and is going to an end, and that's why this is called a Final Dissemination program or conference. Always have to focus not to use final insemination, but this is dissemination. But this is not the end of the project, it's just showing, demonstrating the feasibility of the EuMAR project. We had 3 objectives. One, to securing data flow that is so flexible that it can be adapted to the needs of each country, either having a national competent authority or a voluntary registry, having a software in place or not, so that each country can adapt itself, can use the EuMAR within the setting that it is having or not yet having. We also have focused a lot on the semantics, so that the same thing is called by the same definition in all different countries, and we can still improve on that. And also, we have worked a lot on a technical solution, the IT system that can be set in place, also collecting the individual reproductive care code throughout all countries. This is the governance of the EuMAR project. I would like to focus your attention on work packages 5. There are various work packages, all with different contents and different aims, but an important work package has been the IRCC code, the Individual Reproductive Care Code. This is the ultimate tool with which we want to label infertile patients, either men or women, as they start with their reproductive treatment journey, and that allows us to follow those patients in an anonymized way until the end of the treatment and the outcome of the pregnancy. This whole EuMAR project is embedded in a policy context. An important topic has been, especially with relationship to the IRCC code, that we adhere to the requirements of GDPR, patient anonymity, and I think we have fulfilled that in such a way that informed consent will be needed, but at a low level, if I may say so. The data ownership, ESHRE, from at least my point of view, is the ideal institution to harbor a EuMAR project, something like the EuMAR project, because it's a non-profit organization and independent. And we hope that the SOHO guidelines, the guidelines instituted by the European Union on substances of human origin, collecting those data, that will be an important step into having data registration also on MAR to become compulsory. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Christian. Now, Christina Magli, is your time to talk about the stakeholder landscape and engagement in this project. Thank you, Christian.
Thank you, Carlos. Good morning, everyone. Here in the group, we have a lot of Christina, Christine, Christian, so we are the C leaders. Well, Jasper, I mean, you missed a C. I'm sorry. So, okay, let's go and try to be serious, and let's really start with the project. Well, our first step when we decided to be involved in this project was to identify the key stakeholders. And of course, the first point was to organize ourselves, people from ESHRE, and you see here, Christian already mentioned to you how the governance was arranged in our group. So we organized the central office, some people from the central office, and some professionals with special interest in the topic. EIM members were really important to us because, I mean, they had a lot of experience in data registry. Of course, we took a look at other registries, the one that were already mentioned, to see how they are dealing with the data collection. But then, as part of Work Package 3, that it was an honor for me to coordinate, we were especially focused on the key, let's say, stakeholders that are the EuMAR centers, professionals, of course, national competent authorities, and the different professional organizations. Not to be forgotten at all, actually keeping them in very clear mind, were the patients and patient representatives, as this is their data we are dealing with. And finally, we had also to investigate subcontractors that were going to help us to put this into practice, our project, especially the EuMAR vendors, those that could realize a platform for the data collection. So let's go to the so-called relevant stakeholders for us. That means non-competent authorities, EuMAR professionals, and the patient representatives. So when we started our project, we tried to define what they could bring to us, but especially what they could benefit from a EuMAR project being in place. So we thought, we are very convinced that the competent authorities could benefit from receiving harmonized, high-quality data from this kind of platform. EuMAR professionals, wow, a lot of benefits. I mean, the possibility of evaluating the cumulative data, of really have data, robust data on cross-border that we are not aware at all at the moment. We cannot estimate how big this phenomenon is. And then, of course, another additional points like having key performance indicator based on real data, benchmarking, and, of course, a lot of big, good data available for any kind of positive research project. And for patients, wow, our patients would have finally a real estimation of the data, so transparency, having a real evaluation of how their, let's say, desire of having a baby is based on real data. So a lot of benefits. We decided to follow this strategy. So as I said, we started with the assistance of our EIM members to get in contact. We had to be in contact with all the national competent authorities, not an easy job. In this way, through national competent authorities could have access to EuMAR professionals in a way of arranging the pilot study that is, let's say, the core of this project. We could run a pilot study involving 4 member states. And of course, to do so, it was important to deal with the IT vendors. I mean, to have them to put in practice the issue of the data collection. There was a lot of work to be done in this direction because all vendors had to be assessed as fit for the purpose, and to get to them all the technical information of the necessary information to set up the platform that we needed. At the same time, you see here a timeline. At the same time, we were working with the patient representative, and I am so happy to see here Maciej and Anita from Fertility Europe, because they were absolutely helpful in the development of our project, as in the development of so many initiatives that we have in Escher. Fertility Europe is definitely an additional tool. Sorry to call you a tool, but I mean, you are so important for us. So we decided to have such a, how Elena called it, top-down approach, working to realize this EuMAR project, starting with national competent authorities, the contact with them, to have an idea. So we had to contact all the 27 national competent authorities where they exist. because not in all countries we have national competent authorities in charge of MAR data. So to align with their priorities, to support the design of data reporting standard, and to have the necessary approval for the data submission, because as you can imagine, this is a different situation in all the different member states. So in this way, we thought it was the way of going through a coordinated and standard communication with the different clinics by respecting the expectation flow through the established channels. Since we are in a mosaic situation, as Carlos defined Europe, we designed, we identified two data flows that we established within our project. You will hear more about that, so I won't concentrate that much on this. But we had to design a data flow for countries that have already a cycle-by-cycle national registry, another system for those that do not have such a system. Also consider that even within these two big categories, we have additional differences. Those which submit data manually through a platform, and those that need to do it automatically via an application. So this is a sort of representation of our mosaic situation. We are mosaic like embryos, you know, that embryos, human embryos have a lot of mosaicism, and it is I'm an embryologist, so I have to make reference to embryos. So, and this is a situation of the different member states. You see many colors representing how diverse we are. So this implied some barriers from our side as work package 3, the one that was in charge of stakeholder engagement. So these are a little bit listing the major difficulties. It was not so easy to identify the right national competent authorities for MAR data. We had to keep them engaged, I mean, not to lose the momentum and to keep them enthusiastically involved in the project. And another difficulty was the way of obtaining the approvals, because the national dynamics are, again, a mosaic situation in Europe. But an additional point that we had to do beside this consideration that I made so far was after having the pilot study arranged very close to the end, to evaluate what was the impression, the feedback from the professionals that were involved in this work of submitting the data to the EuMAR platform. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we were very happy, because this is a feedback from the professional that spontaneously agreed on working in this project, that were the 4 countries. We will hear more about it. As you can see from the green bars, the majority of them, they were happy, they were positive. They would be keen on continuing this experience. And what about our patients? Wow, even more exciting results. This was done through questionnaires that were circulated to our patients, again with the help of Fertility Europe, and this is what they said. I mean, the great majority of people, of patients, said that they have more trust in a clinic that would participating in such a project, because they trust that would be more transparency. So this is important, because it's their data we are dealing with, and even more, the very vast majority of patients that responded to our questionnaire were very much in favor of sharing their data. So I think this is an extremely important goal that we achieved. And another important goal is, at the end of this project, that we thought was really positive, we are so convinced of how good this project is that we wanted to continue. So EuMAR 1 is going to be finished today, in these days, because this is a final event, but we want to continue, and we want to go to EuMAR 2. Europe, the European Commission is not involved anymore, so it will be only ESHRE, but we are already contacting different countries because we wanted to make a bigger group, and we have a lot of conversation going on in a positive way, but I was authorized to tell you that 2 more countries already gave approval, and happy to see here Anna from Poland and Mara from Greece. Very enthusiastically, they said, okay, we are in. So this is EuMAR to the beginning, the idea of the beginning of EuMAR 2. The final document of our work was to draft policy recommendations, a series of 7 policy recommendations that you will see for sure during the day. But I think that the core one will be, hopefully, to have the EuMAR cycle-by-cycle registry as a mandatory requirement from Europe. And we hope that this will be the first step towards a donor registry. There is such a need of this, a European donor registry. Let's cross fingers. We cannot conclude without giving thanks to the members of Work Package 3 that did a terrific job. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Christine. As you can see, all of us are terribly enthusiastic about this project and the future. So now it's time for Elena Ashtigi to address the basic concepts of EuMAR and explain us the practical thing. Elena is one of the pillars of our project.
Hello.
Yeah, you. Yes, Elena, go ahead.
Okay, thank you everyone for being here. It's very nice to see so many familiar faces and also some new ones. Today I'm going to be presenting the basic concept of EuMAR. I think some of them, most of you have already heard about, but I hope this will facilitate the understanding of the results that will be presented later on. So before getting into the concepts, I wanted to go through the overall functioning of the EuMAR registry, and some of these parts have already been mentioned, especially by Christina. So we have mainly 2 options for submitting data. We have option A for national registries and option B for clinics. The data that is submitted to EuMAR comes from a parameter list, and you will also hear more details about this. I know this is an important topic for many of you. And the thing that I wanted mostly to focus on for this slide is that EuMAR will be collecting data, of course, but we will also be providing output data that we hope is going to be beneficial for different stakeholders. So we have been working on patient reports. This is something that we believe is going to be useful for patients so that they have a clear, these are supposed to be documents that the patients can receive from their clinic, where they will see an overview of the data of their treatment in that clinic. But this is also a document that the patients that are moving to different clinics can take with them so that professionals can have a standardized way of and an easy way of knowing what happened in previous treatments of that patient. We have also been working on dashboards, and again, these will be presented later on in more detail, but I just wanted to say that we are working on data visualizations. So we will have a dashboard for the general public with aggregated data so that everyone can see what calculations we are doing, and also dashboards for the clinics participating in EuMAR so that they can see their own KPIs. I will tell you a bit more about that in a later slide. We are also exploring the possibilities of having EuMAR data report to EIM so that we can avoid duplication of efforts for countries that are participating in both registries. And finally, of course, we want EuMAR data to support other researchers. So we will work on either doing an application process for data access, or just fall onto the European health data space, the EHDS, when that's ready. But the idea is that data is available for everyone to make as much use as possible. And now that we have this overview, I put together these main 6 concepts that we have been repeating really throughout the past 3 years. So number 1 is cycle-by-cycle data. Number 2, cumulative outcome data. Number 3, cross-border data. Number 4 and 5 are the patient codes, the IRCC and the CSC. And number 6, data privacy. So I'm going to tell you some definitions about each, and then I will give you an example also of how these are applied. So cycle-by-cycle data, it has been mentioned in the previous presentations. This is how we collect data in the EuMAR registry for every individual MAR treatment cycle, rather than aggregating all cycles together as we do in the EIM, the European IVF monitoring. And EuMAR is the first Europe-wide registry to collect cycle-by-cycle data on MAR treatments. We believe this is what brings the most transparency and also data accuracy in the calculations with a higher level of detail. Cumulative outcome data, so we aim also to report cumulative outcomes by combining the results per oocyte pickup cycle rather than per individual transfer, and these will provide an overall view of the results achieved, as we said, in more detail. Cross-border data, this is something also that we've been really thinking about, because we know that this is reproductive care. Cross-border reproductive care is something that everyone here, I'm sure, knows that is taking place, but we don't know much about precisely because it's difficult to quantify because of a lack of data. So we would like to better understand the extent of this phenomenon, how this is happening in Europe, and also, of course, includes the data of the treatments performed abroad in the calculations that we do. So we hope to collect cross-border data, and how we will do it, or the solution that we have thought about to do this, is with the codes. So we have the IRCC, the Individual Reproductive Care Code, that we keep talking about. This is a code assigned to each member of the couple, when there is a couple, or to each patient, that links all the treatments within a clinic. The IRCC will always be requested at the clinic level, and when the IRCCs are sent to EuMAR together with the data, they are encrypted into what we call the EuMAR code. So this means that the IRCCs are actually not seen in the registry. Then we have the clinic switch code, or CSC, and this is a QR code that a patient will receive when they follow treatment in a different clinic. The CSC contains no medical data. It only serves as a secure bridge so that we can follow the patients that move between clinics, or their treatment data, not the patients themselves. And it needs to be scanned at the new clinic, which will just generate a new IRCC. And this is a lot of theory, so I wanted to bring a more practical example to clarify how this works. I think many of you have maybe seen this graph. Let's say that we have a couple that arrives to clinic A. In clinic A, they will receive, each member of the couple, an IRCC. Of course, this is given that they consent to their data being sent to EuMAR. And they will do their treatments in clinic A, and then these data will be sent to EuMAR. And you see here that what we see in the EuMAR registry are already the EuMAR codes. So these are already different. Now let's say that this couple decides not to follow any more treatment in clinic A. They decide to go to another clinic. They will receive the patient reports that I mentioned at the beginning. These will have all the data from the treatments that they did in clinic A. And they will also receive the clinic switch codes, these QR codes. And they will arrive in clinic B. In clinic B, they will present this patient report and the clinic switch codes, and the CSCs need to be scanned by someone in clinic B. And these will just create new IRCCs, again, provided that they consented to their data from clinic B being sent to EuMAR. something similar will happen. They will do their treatments in Clinic B, and all of these data will be sent to EuMAR. Now, just to emphasize here that the IRCCs in both clinics are different, but the EuMAR codes are the same. So this is how it is possible to have the cumulative overview between different clinics. And this is regardless of where the clinics are. So I just wanted to put here that even if the clinics are in different countries, if they both participate in EuMAR, we will be able to capture this cumulative overview. Finally, I just wanted to mention data privacy because people who have been working in EuMAR know how much this has been repeated over the past 3 years. It's really the core of the project. Of course, this is a project of sensitive data, and we have to always think about data privacy first. So EuMAR operates under the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, and we have created a set of features so that we can ensure that patients' data and also clinics' data are protected. So we have 3 main points for data privacy for patients' data. One is the different codes that I just presented. We have different IRCCs in different clinics. We have the CSC that connects them, and in the EuMAR registry, we have still a different code, which means that the code that the clinic has cannot be accessed by anyone else outside the clinic, and no one will have enough information to put together to identify a patient. Then we have been really careful with the EuMAR parameters. They have been revised by our legal advisors so that the data that is collected also cannot be identifiable for patients, even for rare cases of patients. And finally, as it has been mentioned, we will add an additional safeguard using informed consent. And we have had many discussions about this. We believe that it's going to be positive to use patient consent. We just saw the results that Christina presented on patients' views on sharing their data from their treatments to EuMAR. They are quite positive, so we believe this will keep a positive aspect. Of course, we have a somewhat of a limitation with the use of the CSC because we always depend on the willingness of patients to use these codes. So we need to keep raising awareness amongst patients on the importance and the potential of the registry. And finally, I wanted to also put here data privacy for clinic data because we also get some questions about this, so we have thought about it. And of course, clinics data will also be protected. We will have KPIs in the dashboards, and clinics will only be able to access their own KPIs. No clinic will be able to access the KPIs of another clinic. Of course, only when applicable, a competent authority will be able to access the data of the clinics that belong to their mandate. But clinics will only be able to benchmark themselves against a national or an EU average. So that's everything. Thank you so much for your attention. And yeah, we'll exchange more later.
Very clear, and after those 3 presentations, we have the foundations for the second session that I will continue sharing and asking again Christian to present the results of the pilot study with all the implications, the challenges, and of course, the achievements. Thank you. Thank you, Christian.
Thank you, Carlos. Again, I'm very proud to be able to present to you the results of the pilot study. So after having set up the data flow system, the platform, and also after having reflected a lot the items to be recorded, we were very happy to be able to recruit a number, 4 countries that were willing to participate in a pilot study. The pilot study consisted of 2 timely phases, one in which from July to December 2024, in which the data of treatments were being collected, EuMAR treatments, so not only assisted reproduction, but also intrauterine insemination and thawing cycles. And in a second phase, from January to September 2025, we focus on registering the outcomes of those treatments. 2 times 6 months observation periods. The study population included couples and individuals undergoing EuMAR, but also oocyte donors, but no semen donors. And the pilot study was designed such that the data would be collected in a prospective fashion, in prospective manner, cycle by cycle, and the data were to be registered within 5 days of the initiation of a treatment. The 4 countries that participated were Germany, Estonia, Slovenia, and Portugal. We were also lucky that those 4 countries represented the 4 different ways by which the data flows of the EuMAR data transfer could be designed. So the first 2 countries, Germany and Portugal, each have a national registry, and the data were collected by the individual clinics, EuMAR clinics, that would then send their data to the national registry, and the national registry would then send the data to the EuMAR office. In the second 2 countries, Estonia and Slovenia, that yet do not have a national registry. In those 2 countries, the data were directly sent from the EuMAR clinic towards the EuMAR office. We were additionally lucky that the way how the individual reproductive care code were requested was different in the 2 countries with a national competent authority or a national registry. Some countries, mostly in Portugal, the IRCC was requested manually, and the data from the national registry were then sent to the EuMAR office through an API. API stands for Application Programmed Interface. So that is an application in which the incoming data would be then transferred in an automatic or semi-automatic fashion to the EuMAR office, the data platform. And in other clinics, the IRCC code was requested automatically within their software system. Then the other 2 countries, the IRCCs were either requested manually or through an API. So the software system, just by clicking the button, would then request the IRCC automatically and tag that to the patient. I would like to remind you that the IRCC for a normal heterosexual couple would be consist of 2 IRCCs, one for the lady and one for the husband or the partner. And in another situation, data submission from the EuMAR center towards EuMAR could be transmitted manually by keying in the data into the EuMAR platform, or again through an API. So we were able to check the various data flows, which was one of the 3 major objectives of the EuMAR consortium. Here you see results for the 4 participating pilot countries. We compared the number of treatments that were actually registered in the EuMAR platform in comparison to the number of treatments that really were carried on. In Estonia, there was 1 clinic participating as a pilot clinic. There were more treatments carried out than treatments registered in the EuMAR platform, and that is because of informed consent. Especially in Estonia, a number of couples did not wish to participate in the EuMAR initiative because of a national issue that not related directly to EuMAR but to data protection, and that's why at that time period some patients were reluctant to embark on having their data registered. But the other countries, the large majorities of the treatments were registered. Also in Slovenia, there were some issues with informed consent, patients not being reluctant to have their data registered in the EuMAR platform. Again, in a normal heterosexual couple, the main patient would receive an IRCC together with her partner or husband. So there were many more IRCC codes requested than treatments being carried out. But within that short time frame of 6 months, we were able to recruit in the 4 pilot countries more than 50,000 unique main patients. Linking, using the IRCC code, one treatment segment with another carried out in different time points worked well because we were able to register cumulative data from more than 4,300 patients. So patients that underwent more than one treatment segment during that 6 months observation period. And finally, the clinic switch code. Within that relatively short observation time frame, 16 clinic switch codes were requested, but only 4 clinic switch codes from 2 couples were scanned by another clinic. But within the short timely observation period, no data were collected from the other clinic. But in principle, the clinic switch code should be able to work. Although we need for the EuMAR2 a longer observation time in order to really appreciate the acceptance and the compliance to the clinic switch code. The timeliness of the IRCC requests is another important topic. In blue, you see the manual requests of the IRCC code, so the clinician or the embryologist would have to ask for an IRCC code in a couple newly entering a sequence of treatments. And in green is the automatic IRCC requests, and I would like to remind you that from the onset, we asked the participating centers to ask for an IRCC code within 5 days of the beginning of ovarian stimulation, or in those treatments in which no stimulation was done at the latest on the day of the procedure. And the timeliness, there is room for improvement, but especially in the API-supported IRCC request, we see a clear-cut learning curve reaching more than 60% level of timeliness. It is all a matter of culture, adapting to participating in the EuMAR, and I think in the future this can be improved. Then IRCC codes can be requested, but no data entered for whatever reason. A major reason would be that IRCC code was requested, but the patient failed to approve her participation in the EuMAR data registration. Or another reason could be that the patient also embarked on a treatment and decided otherwise. There were a number of IRCC requests, but that were not linked to or not connected to data. The level was the highest in Estonia, again here perhaps because of lack of informed consent. The best rates were achieved in Portugal, that's the pilot country in which the IRCC requested manually. If you do the work to request an IRCC code, you are more motivated to enter the data, but still 8% have IRCC codes without cycle data. Again, this is 6 months in order to adapt to the data transmission is not a long time period. If EuMAR becomes installed on a longer time frame, I could imagine that this could be improved as well. 17% of the IRCC codes without data remained. Then the outcome, so as I said before, during 6 months, data on treatments were requested, and in the next 6 months, the outcomes of the data were being submitted. Here you see in the first column the number of pregnancies that were recorded, pregnancies also including biochemical pregnancies, then the number of miscarriages, the number of deliveries, and the number of live-born children were requested. So this slide shows that it is possible to link treatment modalities together with outcomes of those treatments. I would like to remind you that in EuMAR registries, it is a very unusual situation that professionals from one field of expertise, reproductive medicine, have to collect data from obstetricians and from neonatologists, which is an additional difficulty and I think unique in medicine altogether. Then we had more than 60 parameters during the pilot study, and not all parameters were implemented as we would have hoped for. There were a number of parameters with less than 50% completion rate. The main reason why some parameters, and some are important, such as the date of insemination, the luteal support in frozen embryo transfer cycles, and some neonatal outcome data were not recorded. The main reason was that some registries did not ask for those data, and it was not possible within the short time frame to convince the clinicians, but also the EuMAR centers and the national competent authorities to implement their data collection system to the EuMAR requirements. And the other is that APIs still had to be programmed, and it is a timely and costly procedure, and they were not completely up to those requirements. But again, this is something that we realize now and that we will work on in the future. Some slides here that have already been shown by Christina, but I think I can only remind you, green is good here, without any political background, and pink is less good. But you see that the large majority of the professionals that were involved in the EuMAR data collection were satisfied with participating in the study. And Carlos said to me yesterday that in Portugal some were even sad that they could not continue registering their data beyond the pilot study phase. And a large majority of professionals that are knowledgeable with the EuMAR system and have experience would be willing to participate in EuMAR 2. But we have challenges still remaining. The 3 years experience was not always an easy one. The approvals that we needed from national competent authorities or from national registries were not always easy to collect. The legal requirements in submitting data to an office located close to Brussels were different. So I thought we had like a diploma for informed consent, but that was interpreted in a different way in each of the 4 pilot countries. Some countries needed even an approval of an ethics committee. Others did not require an informed consent, and it is a bit peculiar from a scientific point of view how the same requirements can be interpreted in such a different way from country to another. The involvement of all stakeholders is crucial, and I think EuMAR and especially the usage of the clinical switch code, as Elena said previously, requires the knowledge and also the conviction of the patients to be willing to ask for the reports and to go with the clinic switch code from one clinic to another, or also from one country to another, in order to be able to register and quantify cross-border reproductive care. So all stakeholders, not only you professionals, national competent authorities, but also the patients are crucial in order to have EuMAR functioning on the long term. And then the technical solutions. We've seen that APIs are crucial in order to facilitate the work. Keying in the data 2 or 3 times for different organizations is a tedious, and now technical support by usage of API will be helpful, but installing them is a timely and costly endeavor. And these are the members of the pilot study work package, and I can only be grateful and admire the dedication of the people working at the Azure office and of the people working in the various countries. Some of them we have visited, and it was quite amazing how dedicated they were in participating in the pilot study. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Christian, for the overview of the hard work that you have coordinated so well. So now we have time for questions. Yes, please, Diane.
I have 2 questions for pilot country Portugal. So I'm directing directly to you, Carlos. First of all, a practical one. At what point would you feel at ease to stop with the national registration, which you are doing, I think, in Portugal, and have a very elegant one? What should you achieve even more to be sure that what you register to EuMAR is sufficient? That's a practical one. And then a second one is, it's a political one, and it's referring to EuMAR too. Suppose countries switch or centers decide to only register in EuMAR, will this be a long-lasting, a consisting way of doing so? Because unfortunately, Christine, we just received, as we speak, the information that Belrap is going to stop as for next year, so you may have all of a sudden a new pilot country, I think. But that's to be debated later onwards.
Wow. Okay, thank you, Diane. I'm not sure if I got the first question correctly. We have a national registry for 12 years. The problem with EuMAR is to match our parameters that are slightly different from the EuMAR requested parameters, but we foresee the possibility to match, to adapt in the future. We need to look at the final parameters list to see what we can do, but we are keen to proceed participating in this project, and what I said to Christian yesterday was that some colleagues asked why have we to stop requesting IRCC, a process that was becoming routine, becoming normal, and then we'll stop, and then we'll restart with some difficulties in the future. That's it. But we are keen to continue to proceed. I don't know, the second question was about political.
Well, if EFRE, I think, has decided to go for EuMAR too, yeah. But the thing is, will this be sustainable? And suppose that countries would leave behind their existing or non-existing database and decide on a clinic or on a national basis to go and to work with EuMAR, will this be a consisting ever, as long as it can be in present registration way, because it could be an advantage to have it, as you already mentioned, clinics that now think, oh, I have to stop because the pilot study has stopped. I'm not sure whether the pilot 2.0 with the new countries participating, whether this is a timely, a certain period, or whether this is an not everlasting, but long-lasting and sustainable way of registering.
Okay. Thank you. Christian can answer for sure. I would say that after EuMAR 2, our goal is to have EuMAR forever. That's our project. But Yes.
I can only say that in the grant application that we wrote for the European Union, the sustainability was part of the strategy. So the sustainability is the opposite of ephemeral, and of course we are a bit biased towards EuMAR 2 and then EuMAR Forever, but we think that this is going to be a main part of ESHRE in the future to collect those data, and that goes beyond the EM consortium as we have it now.
Yeah, sure, Basil.
First, I would like to congratulate our colleagues for the superb work and to thank you for the time and energy you put. It's an important project. Now, I think we all agree that the ideal would be to have a platform for all European countries, at least the ones in EU. So my question is, have you explored with European Union this option? Because I think EU, especially now with this, with the crisis with donors, and then we have surrogacies and cross-border and all these things, I think that the European Union should be interested to having a platform that could collect data on a cycle-per-cycle basis, so that we can have reliable results, and also we can identify crisis when it starts, rather than after a painful period. So I'm just wondering whether this discussion has been done and whether there was any positive feedback, hoping a little bit that we may move forward in that direction. Thank you.
When it turns about money, it was limited to a 3-year project, and of course, I don't understand why that is not being prolonged, but it is also an advantage that the European Union is not funding beyond the 3-year period, because that funding of EuMAR 1 was limited to countries, member states of the EU. Now we can expand to countries beyond the EU, and now I'm coming from Switzerland, so I'm happy that Switzerland will embark on EuMAR 2 probably in next year as well. So we can now expand, as EM has done in the past, beyond the European Union. What the European Union is going to be important for is the regulations that will be located or targeted towards member states only, but that is going to be a standard beyond the European Union as well. GDPR is a good example. It's something that is part of the European Union, but it's also adapted and adopted by countries beyond the European Union. And we are in constant discussions. Johanna is the main responsible for that in discussing with the European members of the European Commission what data are to be collected, in which way, and ESHRE is the preferred partner for those discussions, so that with our expertise we can put input into these requirements.
If I may just add something. Basil, please ask the question to the representative of DG Santé that will be here this afternoon. But I fully agree with Christian that the legislation, the rules are even more important, because we have many countries, many member states that have no mandatory registry or no registry at all. Yeah. I have a question from Michael Schultz. How will a clinic switch be handled when souls are transported from clinic A to B for transfer in clinic B?
So the clinic switch code is designed such that the patient has to be aware that this is possible. So if a patient wishes to change clinics for whatever reason, also between two countries, she receives a report together with a page, a paper page in which there is a QR code. She goes then to the other clinic that has to scan that QR code and will then, by then, automatically receive another IRCC, which is distinct from the IRCC in the first clinic. And then that second clinic can start entering the data. These reports will that also are used as a stimulation to follow that pathway, contains all the data that are being sent to the EuMAR office in a structurized manner. So if you get used to it, you will immediately find the topics, the issues that you want to know from past treatments and use them in order to improve your treatment in the second clinic. If a clinic wants to add additional material, it can be done so, but the structured reports are an advantage because they are structured such that it's easy to find the information that you need because it's always going to be the same.
Thank you, Christian. I would add just that to complete the answer to the question is that we rely on the patient's demand of the clinic switch code. So we are empowering the patients and at the same time we depend on them. If we can foresee that the movement from another to another clinic is because something was not correct or some feeling is not positive in the previous one, of course the patients can always request the clinic switch code by email or by any other way. But if they are moving their own embryos or gametes to another clinic, it makes all sense that they request the clinic switch code. But again, we rely on the patient's position and the patient's action. Thank you. Kirsty.
Also from me, a huge congratulations on a fantastic and huge work that you have done. So I was wondering a little bit about the reporting back from the clinics or from the national competent authorities. So when is a cycle sort of presumed to be closed? So if they get their code at the beginning of either the stimulation or the transfer, when do they do the back reporting of the outcome of the cycle? So it could be either that there's no transfer at all, it could be there is a transfer in the pregnancy and then there's a birth. So do they wait until the birth or do they report back several times during the cycle?
We have no rules for that. Sometimes some national competent authorities have their rules. Portugal, for example, they have a key date where the data have to be submitted about treatments and also about the outcomes. But the institution of the dashboard, which includes also a benchmark, would make sense because of that to implement the data on a continuous basis. So then you can always see where you are with all your treatments and also with the outcomes of the treatment. So the whole system is conceived in such a way that we hope to stimulate participating centers to key in the data on a continuous basis.
Okay, that's excellent. Could I also ask a quick, if they wanted I can't remember the name now, the initial code, if they are registered through the national registry, do they get the code from the national registry then, or how do they get the code?
No, the IRCC comes from the platform, the EuMAR platform.
Okay.
Either directly by asking for the IRCC code manually for each of both partners of the couple, or pushing a button in systems that have an API.
So the clinics still have to be engaged with the platform,
but the
just outcome would come from the national registry in those cases. Okay.
But just doing that, that's not much, isn't it?
Just as we do it in Portugal, and it's our global system, is the clinics, the professionals must ask for IRCC manually or automatically because it depends on the consent of the patient. So it's something that is local. And after that, that depends on the system of the country. If the IRCC is sent to the competent authority registry, and then it's the basis for the API. And the API can send data every week, every day, every month. That depends of the system that the country is.
So you can send several times.
Yeah, continuously. And in Portugal, we send it weekly.
We do in Sweden as well.
But that depends. Yeah.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, Stefan?
Thank you very much. I'd like to express my admiration of the work you have carried on. It's very impressive. And so I'd like to come back to the sustainability of the project, because at a certain point, EuMAR Forever will not be anymore a project, it will be a fact. Mm-hmm. And so for the country having a national registry, or for the country thinking to have one, and I hope the other one will be pushed to have one because of this availability of EuMAR, ESHRE will not be able to sustain this forever. So how do you imagine the things? Because you will save some money for the country having a register, because they will not have to do the work anymore. So you could imagine they get the data from EuMAR and not generating their own data. And for the ones that are thinking, it will also save money, because maybe they will not have to develop their own register, but get the data again from the EuMAR. So can we imagine that at a certain point that this country participating will subscribe, will pay some fees for that? And how do you see the very long term, the forever term of this project in terms of sustainability? And
as part of EuMAR 2, we are developing business cases, how the financing on the long term will be managed, but at the moment we are not yet at any place of first taking the results of the pilot study into account, all the challenges and experiences that we gathered. We are now designing EuMAR 2 and also recruiting countries to participate. At some point, it will become EuMAR Forever. I am convinced that it will be the case, but there are others to decide about that. And then somehow the financing in the future has to be solved. I've been a member of ESHRE since 1986, and with the annual congress, at the first annual congress I attended, there were 80 participants, and now we have 13,000. Something similar will happen with EuMAR, I gather. It will become an international standard, not only within Europe, but also on a global scale.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for presenting this considerable data, and what a wonderful way to start. And this is clearly a high effort, high gain project, a lot of effort behind it. One question is, with the data that was presented now, we see a discrepancy between the IRCC number and the data that was entered. So, and that was a big discrepancy. So any idea strategically as to how to address this in the future? That's one thing. The other thing is, I understand the only way to do this is to empower the patients and then depend by the patients, but that kind of leaves us in a weak position, so to speak. But that's the reality. And we were just discussing now with Dr. Kalabocas what would be perhaps a way to alleviate this and how to implicate perhaps physicians or, you know, the MAR Center in this roadmap. And then also one last thing with regards to the design that perhaps that was not very clear to me. I see that we have a first IRCC, and then we get a second one moving forward to another MAR unit. Mm-hmm. And I see these are two clearly, you know, not related numbers. Is there any reason why we wouldn't want the second IRCC to be sort of connected in a way, as in, you know, have some sort of indication in the end, so as the physicians and the next MAR Center know that this is another effort, this is the continuation of the journey. And I was wondering if there's any benefit behind that. So, yeah.
Of course, the system if we want to obey the rules of GDPR, is not going to be watertight. Mm-hmm. And it's also a matter of education and of getting adapted. And again, all stakeholders are to be made aware of this, of EuMAR, and there will be a development over time. And I think the development will be such, but not on short time, that it will become implemented more and more and that it will become standard. The CSC code is the weakest point of all, and we had numerous discussions and lengthy discussions on that. But if we want to obey to the GDPR rules, and if we don't have any additional mandate to have those data registered, that's the best that we could think of.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, and I must agree with you that we rely on patients, but of course the explanation and the motivation can come from professionals. So of course we need to rely also on professionals and their will to have the extra work of explaining this to the patient once, because after asking the IRCC, it will last forever. And about the CSC, that is the weakest point, because we cannot explain to our patients in the first consultation. We are asking you, the IRCC, okay, but if you are not happy with us and move to another clinic, you need to ask for another code. That's the difficulty, and that's why Fertility Europe work is crucial in this point, because the patients many times complain that they move because they are not happy, and then their information is not known, or they have start from scratch again things. So that could be. Yeah. Yes, that's motivation, continuous and permanent motivation. That's the way. Yeah.
Can I add to that two things? One is these reports. The reports are to the benefit of the patient. This transparency is a major empowerment of the patient, of the data that are being sent, that are being produced and sent. I remember several patients in my professional career that underwent treatment different from those that were told to the patient. Oh, yes. Cheating. And the other big tool are the dashboards, where you have the physicians and the embryologists will have a continuous follow-up of what they are doing. And it can become addictive to look every week or on a daily basis at the statistics with all the filtering tools that are embedded in it. I think this, the daily use, the daily adaptation, the daily experience with that will motivate them to key in the data appropriately.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Yes. No, just, sorry. Just a small remark, because
we have a cross-border problem here.
Yeah. I need to report that data. So just to introduce myself, I'm Theo Kalambokas. I'm a clinician. I'm a professor in the University of Athens and member of the regulatory authority of EuMAR in Greece, along with Professor Simopoulou. Just to say a small remark, and I will be awaiting, very curious about the Greek stats that eventually will come out the next years. I really feel, judging by the mentality of our patients, that it would be very difficult, the reporting of self-reporting, a new cycle when they will change center. I will be waiting to see the results, but as a clinician speaking, I am a little bit, not curious, I am a little bit afraid of what they will eventually do. You know, they change doctors. Professor Tarlagis can definitely make a remark about what I'm saying. You know, they leave disappointed.
Sure.
Center A for Center B, and I'm a little bit worried about what
we'll speak in 10 years' time.
Yes. That's it.
in 10 years' time, in the next meeting, we'll see evolution, I'm sure. Yes, please?
Wanted to add something to your two questions. So the first one was about the discrepancy in the RCC codes and then the entry of the data. So I can share at least the experience from Belgium, where we had a prospective registry by cycle, and we had to ask what we called a BERAP number, which was the number to give data to the registry. And from the early beginning, we saw that we had also more IRCC or BERAP numbers than the data that were entered. And the reason for that was that the clinicians and the teams in the hospitals were not very used to that. And sometimes they requested for the same patient 2 or 3 times the IRCC. So I'm not sure that we have to tackle an issue there, but that it is more a practical question of using the system. Yes, cleaning. That's one point. And the second point is about keeping the clinic switch codes. So at the very beginning also, this code was not existing in our system, but it came out from the experience and the feedback from the stakeholders that the patients wanted to keep their autonomy. Because if you go from one clinic to the other, maybe you do not want to tell the other clinic that you were there. So, but this is something that we have to keep, and we have to convince the patients about the importance of the data. And you also raised a doubt, I think, about the linkage between the RCC code and the clinic switch code, but there is a link. It is in the black box of the EuMAR platform that the link is made. When the clinic switch code is generated, it takes into account the ERCC, and there remains a link. So the clinics cannot see that it is the same code, because one of the wishes that was expressed by the professionals also was that one clinic didn't want to compare with another clinic because of matters that you can obviously understand. And that is the reason why this system was made, besides responding to the GDPR regulation. So. Voilà.
Okay, finally.
Okay, thank you very much. Milan Redic from Slovenia. Actually, congratulations for your excellent work, and we are very proud to be a part of this pilot study. And particularly this is helpful because we are now in the process of establishing our national registry. I think that this voluntary, of course, is very interesting, but I think that if the country has mandatory national register, then it's all easier. But actually, I'm also interested, maybe we will talk about this later, about the quality of data that we collected, because what you presented actually is evident that there is a lot of data which is missing. Do you analyze this data, which data are missing, and if there is data go through the national registry, maybe if there is less missing data, when the clinic reports, it's more missing data if there is manual putting data or through EPI procedure?
Of course, we had a short time frame in order to set up the system and then to recruit countries to participate in the pilot study. And those countries with the national registry already had a system. And it was not possible to convince the national competent authorities, at least in Portugal, but also the participating centers, to change the list of parameters that they were submitting. And that's why some items had a less than 50% completion rate. But that is something that with time we will improve. We have revised, Jesper will talk about that, the topics, the issues, the parameters that we will be recording, also to obey to the GDPR rules, and it will become less, but we should consider EuMAR as a backbone, key data being collected, key outcome data, allowing us to construct cumulative outcome data. And if countries, institutions, or organizations want to set up specific studies with specific questions, they can use that backbone upon which, with informed consent and with the needed financing, large data sets can be collected, such as the composition of culture media, the outcome of the children, whatever, a scientific question comes up. But EuMAR must be considered as a high-quality backbone upon which detailed studies can be constructed if needed, and if the money is available.
Thank you. Christian, you have some questions from the cyberspace. How about online reporting from the center to the national registry? That's one question.
Yes, you need an API or you do it manually, but and the national competent authority sends then the data. That's the data flow model number 1 that has been used in Portugal and in Germany. So the national competent authority or the national registry in Germany, it's on a voluntary basis, remains in vigor and sends then the data at regular time intervals to the EuMAR platform.
Okay, thank you. And another one, how much will be the cost for each country to set up the platform?
Yeah, the platform, the national registry is a costly event, but that's the country that has to finance that. If a country does not want to spend that money in a national platform, they can embark on EuMAR saving the money. I think this is the only cost that would be needed is to install the APIs in order to have to key in the data twice or 3 times per patient.
Yeah, my experience is that we have costs once to settle the API, and then it depends on the national registry if it exists, of course. Another one, how do you see in practical terms the implementation of EuMAR forever?
That's the whole of EuMAR 2. That's the whole afternoon we will talk about that, isn't it?
Yeah.
We have to learn from the experiences. We have to convince national institutions to what extent informed consent is needed. The more elaborate an informed consent is to be, the higher the loss rate we will have. Then it depends on whether there is a national registry already in place or not. But the parameter list will be reduced to the really needed. I think a set of parameters will still be collected in an aggregated way because of the rarities of the event, so that we cannot link it with an IRCC that would make the case traceable. For example, maternal death is an example of that. So we will continue to collect some data on an aggregated basis, but the bulk of the data will be prospective cycle by cycle in the forthcoming years.
Thank you. Of course, in practical terms, we have no idea. We are talking in theoretical terms, but I can imagine that we'll go step by step with the inclusion of countries year by year, something like that. So now we have one more question on the cyberspace. It's up to you.
Yeah, well, it's connected with the last answer. I mean, how does a country get on board with EuMAR, maybe in the EuMAR 2? And if it's not a country, can individual centers get on board?
If a country wants to step into EuMAR 2, just write a letter and you show your commitment and you will be on the list and you will be contacted as soon as EuMAR 2 will start. That will be somewhere next year. September, October, that's what we envisage. We are happy to invite any country. If single MAR clinics want to start, we are happy as well, but the problem is there, the interinstitutional switch from one clinic to another. The fewer clinics in one country participate, the lower the CSC code uptake rate will be followed. So we would be more happy if entire regions or countries would join in.
Yes, please. Anita?
Thank you. Anita Fincham from 38 Europe, representing patients here. So I would like to thank you for inviting us here today, and I would like to thank ESHRE for running this project, which EuMAR Forever, we sort of envisaged it should have always been there. As a patient, when you don't think about it when you start your treatment, but you kind of assume that EuMAR is there, I think. So as patients, we were very happy to see such a great support for the initiative, for the project among the patients, and also among the professionals. And I think that actually bodes well for the future of the project. So from us, we think of many ways of finding the right narrative for the patients to motivate them, and that this is the project that will help them, that will support them. So sharing the data and the transparency that they get from the clinics and from the system is for their benefits. So this bottom-up approach that we're working on, but we also have a lot of initiatives, and as you know, the Coalition for Fertility, that it's close cooperation also with ESHRE, and we're working hard on the top down, and it's part of our advocacy that we also get EU to see the need for such register. And with these two approaches, we're really hoping that it will be forever and before, and we actually get the right information on how the treatment in Europe works. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anita, and thank you for your work with us. We have 3 more questions for you. Do you have an idea how setting up a donor registry? It's outside EuMAR, but
that's the most difficult question. So there is now a document that I was, or 2 documents actually, that I was happy to read in the last few weeks about donor and all the aspects of that. I think a donor registry is going to be needed, but again, under the GDPR rules, not an easy task to do. That's the one thing, the GDPR rules. The other, for example, semen can be, donors of semen can be recruited in a clinic, but they can also be recruited in big institutions, and the sample sent to clients throughout Europe. So that is already an issue. How to register all those under GDPR rules. The other is that, but that's my personal opinion, that the requirements that are set by the European Commission are such that this does not match real life in clinical practice. There are information that is required on such a detailed base that I think this is not feasible in daily practice. For example, the number of semen samples stored frozen or still present on a yearly basis, I think this is, and then that per individual, that is, I think, unfeasible. But so we will find a common sense, a common way, and I think on the long term, EuMAR should serve that, but that's my personal opinion, also as a donor registry, but we have also internal discussions about that, isn't it, Carlos?
Okay, thank you. Another one, did any center have any major problems in that submission? In our pilots?
Joanna, you can say more about that.
So, what I can say is that there were some differences in the time point when we received the data. So the centers that entered the data manually, of course, we were able to provide them with our platform. We did a training in the beginning, so that was a process that was there from the start, and we received the data quite soon. But then maybe there were some issues that centers didn't always key in the cycles for each patient or something, and there was more of an issue in this tracking of are we really complete? Whereas, for instance, in the automatic connections with the electronic medical record software of the clinic, there, in the end, we are maybe receiving more complete data, but then we experienced some issues with building the IT connection. We saw that maybe some small bugs needed to be fixed, and then there were some delays. So there were different circumstances in each of the clinics, and I think none of the clinics didn't have any challenges. I think there were always challenges, but in the end, what we can say is that we did receive most of the data from all clinics. There was no clinic that didn't send any data, except actually, yeah, there were 2 clinics in Portugal that were invited to participate, just as every other clinic in the country, but declined that and didn't request any IRCCs to smaller centers. Carlos, if you want to say anything about them.
Yeah, but there is no major problems. Those were the expected problems in a learning curve in a so complicated process. So the answer is major problems we are not aware. Another question, do you have a vision on how clinics or countries outside the EU will be able to participate in EuMAR too? Will it be on a subscription basis? I don't know exactly subscription meaning.
So one of the advantages that we don't have any financial support anymore from the EU is that we can expand to non-EU European countries. I think this is an advantage. There is no subscription needed, just a letter of commitment to the ESHRE office or the EuMAR office, and then they will be approached for the organizational details after that.
Thank you. Before Andreas' last question, we have a comment. EuMAR could be a kind of quality assurance like some certificates. Can this help in the dissemination and economic viability of the project?
Yeah, it will be something like a golden credit card. So you will have a label with the EuMAR logo and the ESHRE logo that you can put either on your website or in the waiting room if you are participating in the EuMAR. We think that this has to be recognized because there's an additional effort needed to be involved, and it is also a quality label for the future.
Okay. Andreas, please.
Thank you. Andrea Romano from the Netherlands. My congratulations for this nice work, of course, but I have 2 questions regarding the survey that you conducted, because I think this can instruct how to set up the EuMAR 2. The first question is related to the sample for this survey, the sample, who you reached out, because there were around 40 clinics. Did you reach out 1 person per clinic or multiple professionals per clinic? And in the patients, there were 30,000 codes, I think, 4,000 pregnancies. So who do you reach out, and what was the response rate?
The survey?
Okay, so for the survey of the clinics, we did reach out to all the clinics, and we sent it to 1 contact point, but we invited them to disseminate it further within the clinic. So we have some clinics that did not respond at all, and others where multiple staff members responded. And I don't know the exact numbers by heart. Maybe Elena does, but no.
26, I think we had.
Yeah. In terms of the patient survey, this was actually not tied to participation in the pilot study. So we considered that it's more or most relevant to get a general image of the European patient population, and not so much this, because there was no real individual experience there to compare, like with a pilot study participants where we really wanted to survey them. So it was more about the general attitudes towards a data collection like EuMAR, and we received responses from all over Europe.
Okay.
900, yes, exactly, 900 responses.
Okay. And my second question is...
And last one?
Last. So you saw some people, especially the professionals, did not agree, or especially in the participation to the second round. Mm-hmm. Now, it's not to focus on the negative aspect, but it's really to identify barriers that can be removed. Do you know the main reasons why these professionals were reluctant to participate in the second
Well, it's with any survey, there are always positive ones. Luckily, the majority was positive, and there are those neutral that have like a blank cerebral activity. Those are the gray ones, and then we have the pink ones, the negative ones. And there will be always opposition, but we do not yet know exactly why they were against.
But maybe it would be good to look at to see whether there are barriers that you can remove. Yeah. Because, okay, if someone does not want because he doesn't like, that's out of question. But okay, thank you.
Joanna?
Just to very briefly mention, the neutral ones were mainly the participants from Germany, because in Germany there was actually no real, nothing they had to do. The codes were requested automatically from their software. The data was sent automatically from the national registry. So they were neutral. The negative ones were mostly manual entry participants. So we can really see that this actually having to log into the platform, actually keying in the data, it even required a full-time staff member, I think, for some clinics. So that is something that put a burden on the clinics. So if possible at all, we are really preferring this API automatic setup. And that's also why in the future we're now considering creating an option for Excel file uploads rather than this manual filling in forms into a portal. But that's something we'll have to see if it can be workable.
I would also like to point out that the pilot study was done without the dashboard, so without benchmarking. So in EuMAR 2 we will have these dashboards in place, and then the professionals will then see what comes out of their additional work. I think this could be an additional incentive to really appreciate the benefit of participating in EuMAR.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you all. Very exciting discussion, and that means engaging, and that means that we can count on you for the next phases. And that closed the first part of the meeting. So happy coffee break, and we'll come back at noon. Thank you.
Okay, so welcome back. Before starting, since we are very sharply on time, Switzerland, I mean, we are following the Swiss rules here. Two informations. After the session, this session, we will have lunch downstairs. But before going to lunch, please stay outside because we want to take a big group picture. So don't leave because we know that some people is leaving. Is leaving. Is leaving in the afternoon, so we wanted to take a group picture. Okay, so now let's continue with the non-C person in our group. It happens. But okay, you have a big duty to do now. Updated parameters and definitions. So please, Jasper.
Thank you, Mrs. C. I want to take 2 steps back. For now, we have been thinking about a lot of beautiful horizons in the future. 2 steps forward, EuMAR forever. Everyone's enthusiastic. Even Christian was appointed the ambassador of EuMAR 2. As you can see, he's very enthusiastic. As a simple clinician, working on a daily basis, I heard my Greek colleague talk about it as well. I have to explain to the people at daily work in my clinic what actually is going on. Why do they have to do this? Why is this so important? They consider all these things as a burden. So we have to convince them and all the colleagues that are not here why this is so important. I think Christian did a terrific job, but it's rather theoretical. And we have to take it to the practical point where actually the colleagues in the field working their butt off as we speak, that they are going to do EuMAR 2.0 forever, whatever, in the future as well. For I think it's the future, but we have to make it in a way that we can take the colleagues into consideration that are maybe not that familiar with EuMAR, with EIM, with all the other things, but they're very important to shed a broad picture of the new, I think, pan-European situation where we actually can learn from each other. So it's very important. I'm not negative, pessimistic, etc., but in a way realistic, for I think we have to take it step by step. Everyone agrees, but from a practical point of view, we share the same ideas, but it's a different approach, maybe another way of explaining the same thing. Today, I have the privilege to discuss two topics with you before and after lunch. It's hard to keep you awake before lunch, so I'll do my utmost. But parameters are not very interesting. We consider that in a way, but they are very important. They're the basis to everything we do, etc. We didn't mention them before, but it's the basis from all our registries. And it was one of the aims of the project that we need to identify and define all the relevant EuMAR parameters, also on fertility preservation. And if we look at it more closely and we look at the specific aims, that would be to identify the relevant items to be registered and then taking into account all the stakeholders, and they have been mentioned in the previous talks, so I think we don't need to mention them again, but it's very important to embark everyone, especially the patients, but also the colleagues that do a lot of work as we speak. And it is also very important that we speak the same language, and that would be to create a glossary of these standardized items to make sure that we actually have a proper harmonization. And just to mention an example, in my country, we don't have a very good registry. We also are very jealous of the BELRAB registry, but since a few minutes, I'm not that jealous anymore. But we see that registries can be helpful. But in the Netherlands, we don't have that registry yet, working on it. But in doing so, we came up by seeing that, especially for defining pregnancy, we had 8 ways of defining a pregnancy. And everyone was reporting a pregnancy, but in asking to the centers, what do you actually mean, we came up with 8 different definitions of a pregnancy. And just by harmonizing that within my country would be an example to do that European-wide, that we think we talk about the same thing, but it's very important that we actually can compare apples with apples in the future, so we actually can have fair comparisons. Within EIM, and if we're talking about 2 steps back, the basis of all the parameters and selection is more or less there's a lot of decades of work already behind it. I see a lot of colleagues in the audience that have been working for the last decades within the EIM as well, the European Infertility Monitoring, and they've been working on a registry already within Europe, trying to define parameters and come up with definitions. It's work in progress. We've tried to set a new mark within EuMAR, but also for the future, new treatment modalities will come up, so it will be something that needs to be redefined in the future as well. For now, we've tried to come to a more or less short list for now, but it has a background. It's not like we're going to do very new things. You see a kind of timeline here where we had already, based upon knowledge from the past, from the, especially from the EIM, but also taking other glossaries into account, we've come to some accepted terminology by the end of 2023. And in the meantime, we heard a lot about it. The project has started a pilot, and we gained more insights about the way this list was adapted in the future. And you have to be honest, we had to readapt and redefine our parameter list. And by now, by this final dissemination of EuMAR Part 1, it's good to share our, I would say, in-between conclusions of the parameter list so far, but also think ahead what could be next. And the two stakeholder events, then and now, actually are the way to express what we have actually achieved. The parameters, more or less, those that are familiar with giving the data to the EIM and are the national representative, they are more or less familiar with all the factors involved. And you can see that the parameters to be included in the register are subdivided by a lot of modules. And from these modules, you can actually derive, again, from the register, actually a lot of data and do some comparisons between the centers, between the countries, between, etc. But my colleague will talk about that afterwards. But the various modules, you can see them here from identification, patient variables. I will not go through the whole list, but the modules try to define everything we do on a daily basis within our working field, within the field of fertility. And we try to find a way to express and register everything we do on a daily basis. Harmonization, as said, is key to do so, to be able to compare in a fair way what we do, but actually to learn from each other. And this, the development of a parameter list was not intended to reinvent the wheel. There's already a lot there. I think the most important organization that was the backbone of our parameter list was the EIM, the European Infertility Monitoring Asset, which is still active. And it's good to underline here that the EIM will be active afterwards. It's the organization that will continue to gather data on the European situation within IVF, MAR, etc. And the EuMAR is a way to see whether we can make it better in the future. Until then, everyone will keep on gathering data within EIM. It will be the ASHRAE organization that will be responsible for gathering data. This might be an alternative for the future, but not for now yet. Is this parameter list? Did it come out of the blue? No, it's based by the EIM, but also the EDQM, which is more an EU organization. The EuMAR, which is an international organization, also has a glossary on definitions. And also, we've learned a lot from the national registries. And interestingly, if we talk about the same thing. We think in Europe, the way it's being defined, the way it's being dealt with, can be different between all the countries that are that contribute to EuMAR, to EIM, but also sitting here. So it's interesting to see that if we talk about the same thing, it can have a lot of interpretations. So what happens after we defined the last list, which was actually used in the pilot study? We got stakeholder feedback from the list, from the national authorities, registers, members, EuMAR, EDQM, as said. They had some comments on the first list. We started the pilot study. And as said, and beautiful shown by Christian, a lot of information came out of that by a lot of things that were actually filled in, but also parameters that didn't were met in gathering the data, so we had to consider whether we would keep them in the parameter list or not. I will talk about that later. We need to validate everything, so the validation rules should be clear, and if the parameters would be poorly answered, we need to discuss whether they should be removed, or if the pilot study was implemented so quickly that the national registries couldn't adapt accordingly, we have to give them maybe more time. That was actually the discussion within the work package to see what is the best way forward to have a parameter list that is comparable but also feasible. And we did a revision just a few months ago, and we took all these 3 steps into account and tried to find consensus again on parameters. And consensus with something like 8 colleagues is pretty challenging. So we got the module just to give you an idea of what we went through. So the IRCC was already discussed, I think, extensively. It's new. We have to explain why we do it. We have to find a way that it will be implemented in a way that it will not cause burden to the people that are not here, but actually can use it in a more, as we heard, in an automatic way. I think that is the way forward, where we can actually add something. But apart from this EuMAR RCC, we talked about cycle identification. We don't go through it, but in a way we try to find a way that we can actually be able to define every cycle, whether it's fertility preservation at D, whether it's an insemination, also oocyte donation or sporium donation, it's called F. I think the recent discussion and also the opinion paper by Ashray underlines the fact that a pan-European registry of donation patients, etc., is very necessary. It is, I would say, 3 steps forward to talk about the things that EuMAR will take care of that in the future. Hopefully it will, but it also needs European legislation, pan-European legislation, to be able to do so. We have ideas on that it's best in the best interest of our patients, in the best interest of the children, but it's quite complex. I think in a lot of countries, in Belgium, but also in my country now, is a lot of debate on the number of donors that come from the European banks in Denmark especially. So a lot of debate there. We have to do better, but maybe EuMAR can help in the future, but that's not at the moment the topic we want to talk about, but it might help in the future. But we need also a European backbone for that, and maybe in the afternoon we can talk about that a little bit further. But also identifying something like in vitro maturation, so every cycle needs to be defined. Then if we talk about module 2, it's a nice example of putting things in or putting things out. And just to underline the fact how we went through this process with these 8 colleagues, which I will show later, let me do a quick poll. From the people in the audience here, who think that smoking status is important to register? May I see some hands? I would say that's a 50-50 call. And if you look from a scientific point of view, who would think that smoking status should be in to say something about the outcome if smoking is a relevant factor for the outcome of MAR or not? Who think it's important? And it's a little bit more. So if you look from a scientific point of view, you would love to have it in. And that was always the discussion within our group, that a lot of parameters have a strong, I would say, scientific basis to put it in. For it's important to do future analysis and to let's say something about the covariates and do some scientific work. But on the other hand, you have to limit it to keep it feasible, to keep it, let's say, digestible for the people that don't have that scientific background. And that's always the field where we had some that wanted more and others say, leave it out, keep it simple. So that was always trying for me to keep some kind of consensus, which was, before I started the work group, I had dark hair, and you can see what happened. So we tried to find a way to find a consensus there. Same thing for body mass index. Who thinks it's important? Who actually is working? In my clinic, we have upper limits for BMI. Who has also? Just a few. You're treating patients with a BMI of 50 no matter what. Okay. Not saying something about it, but it can be a factor. It can be a factor affecting the way we do our business. It can be a factor in how treatment is being done. But as you can see, there's a big delete here. So we had this discussion before. We said it might be important. In my clinic, we have upper BMI limits, but during the process, during the pilot study, we found out we can think as a work package group that it's important, but the field says no. So, in a way, we have to be, let's say, practical, that if no one actually fills it in or thinks it's important, we have to leave it out. And these are a few items where you might say from a scientific point of view, might be interesting, might be necessary, but we have to leave it out for it's not filled in, and then we have a lot of missings, and that's the way we redesigned more or less the parameter list. In that way, we went through all these modules, whether they were filled in, what was the uptake, whether it was, whether the clinics could adapt, whether the clinics could find or share their data, and then we came up with this list. You see now the patient variables, and just to underline that. That we went through all these modules one by one, discussing all these items. And as you saw before, 64 items. I got 15 minutes, so I can talk with you for every item, something like, let's say, 40 seconds. I'm not going to do so. I just share with you what we went through, item by item. And you can see that sometimes we had to leave something out. If you talk about ovarian stimulation, a new item might come up in the future, as indicated here, duo-stim as a treatment modality. It was asked for by the centers. We do duo-stim. Where can we put it in the parameter list? So that's an example of where we found a way that it can be added to the module, but sometimes we scheduled and redefined some parameters that in the end everything can be in. Laboratory data, very interesting as a clinician. The embryologists had far more consensus and were very clear about what should be in or out. So the clinicians, there was a lot of debate on what should be in, out, etc., etc. And the embryologist said, well, we have international standards. This should be in, this should be out. And a few items you could have some discussion about. But as you can see, the parameters remain the same. And also after the stakeholder consultations, they say, well, this is okay. So a very nice colleagues to work with on a daily basis, but also within my work package group. Laboratory data, this was something about redefining how the embryos that were used or not used, etc. So we had to redefine some things. This list will be part of the final dissemination report, so it will be available. So you don't need to make pictures. You can see the final list from this meeting. So you will have the final list available. And just to see that every module we had to go through all the 64 items, and even my wife asked, what are you going to do again in Brussels now? And this was every time we went with the working group through all the items, and every item was not like, yes, we have consensus on that. No, with 8 very dedicated and very professional colleagues, they all had their own backgrounds why these items should be in, out, or modified. It was interesting. Embryo transfers, same holds true. So we can go through all these modules. Look at my chair. How many more minutes do I need to fill up? 0. Okay, then I'll come to an end. So we go through all these modules, and I think we can say, luckily, we've come to a final list which is available. You might argue about it. It's good. We're here yes, you might say some might be in, some might be out. In our system, in our country, this is defined in another way. Yes, thank you for all your comments. Thank you for all your insights. But we've come to some kind of consensus, some kind of way forward. And for the time being, this will be it. And we're going to use this parameter list from now onwards to discuss, to do validations, to think about, and we're going to talk about that later, EuMAR 2, but we need some kind of basis, and I think on behalf of the whole work package, we're happy that we can present this final list for now. And it's not perfect, and I think we already heard about something like complications. One of the complications, very interesting, I learned a lot during these sessions, one of the complications was maternal death. And I think it's quite a pretty complication, not pretty in a sense that it's good, but it's clear. But it's GDPR identifiable, so we cannot ask for it on an individual basis. An interesting fact, the legal part was a big thing within the whole EuMAR project. We, as clinicians, embryologists, had a lot of bright ideas, but the legal part from a GDPR background said, this is not feasible, this is not allowed. So we had to leave some things out, not because we think it's not important, we had to do that in another way. And I think maternal death is one of these items. Again, all these items, we went through them, we came to a final list, please have a look at them. The second part would be the parameters that can be derived from this register, and we can do some benchmarking, we can do some to see what's actually in, think about cumulative pregnancy rates. So actually, one of the big disadvantages of the EIM was that we can compare the pregnancy rates per cycle, but we cannot compare actually the trajectories of the patients to see what actually comes out. One of the goals was to share some light on that within the EuMAR. So that will be one of the topics that will be one of the main outcomes of the EuMAR project as well. I've come to an end. I want to thank once more all the very dedicated and all the colleagues that contributed to the work. We had a lot of nice discussions, and we've come to this list, and I hope that this will be the first step forward to EuMAR 2, and I'm happy to have some questions, or will it be no questions at the moment? In the afternoon, I'll be more than happy to discuss. But the list is available, and it's the first step forward. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Jasper. Nice presentation. Now to complete the topic, we go to Christine Wins. dashboards, futures, and KPIs. Due to the time constraints, I'm just received a message here that we are supposed to skip the discussion because lunch is strictly between 1 and 2. But maybe there is more time in the afternoon since both Jasper and Christine are presenting again. So please, Christine.
So I try to keep it short, but I guess that you all are eager to see what comes out from all this big work. And we know, oh, that's not the good one. You have seen all the different components, and I wanted to stress again on the fact that this is the work from 8 work packages and 40 experts to finally have some benefits from this EuMAR project. We have spoken about the patient reports, and now I will try to show you a bit of the visualization of all the data that has been collected but also will be collected. So this is the dashboard. So of course this meets one of the important objectives of the EU, which is transparency for everybody, but also especially for the patients so that they can take an informed decision on the treatment they want to go through. And this involves, of course, quality indicators, what we call the key performance indicators, and we need to be able to benchmark them against relevant stakeholders, and that's why we need to pay good attention to what is a quality indicator. So it is a tool to quantify the quality of a selected aspect of care. And in EuMAR, this selected aspect of care is about safety, effectiveness, and equity. And this means that if we want to be consistent and comparable, we need to have very good specifications on the numerators, the denominators, but also on the data collection requirements. And you have seen in the list of parameters, some want to remove some want to end some. But at the end of the day, what is important is to have our denominators, because otherwise we cannot calculate any relevant outcomes. And these dashboards and these KPIs also need to be tailored, not only to the objectives, but also to the different stakeholders that we want to serve with this registry. But we also wanted to have some additional things in these dashboards because we do not want to stop EIM like this and say now it's EuMAR, it's not EIM anymore. We want to see some continuation in the data so that we can compare over the previous decades. The cross-border data, of course, need to be included because in EIM we have no clue, more or less, to what is happening there. And then the final aim is to have these cumulative data. And we need to present it to the different audiences, to the different stakeholders in different ways. Because not everybody will use the same type of data and not everybody has the same aims. So we need to take into account all the list of stakeholders that you have here. So of course, first the professionals in the clinics and the MAR centers, but then also the national registers and the competent authorities, see what their needs are to try to decrease the workload of everybody. And then the researchers, because one of the aims of EU is also to favor open science, and so we would like to provide the opportunity to respond to some research questions that could be submitted, of course, after ethical approval, and of course, not by one single person, preferably, but in a multicentric way, so that we can have data that are true for all the scientific community. And then you have the patients, and we spoke already a lot about the patients, and the information that we need for the patients can be sometimes very different than what we need at the clinic level. And at the end of the day, we need also to take into account policymakers and especially the EU stakeholders in this context. So this means also that the outcome data that we need to present will depend on these different stakeholders. For instance, at the clinic level, you need to have cycle-by-cycle information, and you need to have parameters that are comparable and that you can benchmark against the national averages. At the national registers or competent authority level, you can have both. You can submit aggregated data or cycle-by-cycle data for some countries who have a cycle-by-cycle registry, and then you have to be able to benchmark towards averages of other member states. For the researchers, you can provide aggregated data because of GDPR rules, of course, and of course, specific data subset depending on the research question that they have. For the patients and the general public, we should provide only aggregated data, and this is the same for the EU stakeholders. So how was it when we developed these dashboards? So it was like a multi-step approach. So WP5 brainstormed on the content based on the input of WP4, which was the parameter list, and of course the IT possibilities, and transform all these ideas into an output that is understandable by everybody. And so during the pilot study, we gathered a number of data, and these dashboards were populated with such data. But of course, we had the time constraints that we have presented this morning, which were quite short. And of course, the data that is there is what could be collected during a limited time frame. So this means that there were a lot of data where there was not enough already to have something relevant and interpretable in the dashboards. And there were also some concerns on missing. So the pilot was very useful to see how it works when you have the data. And what we found is that when you have an empty field, it can be because it is a missing value, they have not registered it, or because it is data that is not needed in the specific questions that were requested for the specific patient. So these things all were challenges that needed to be fixed and that still need to be improved. So we could not analyze all features on the short time frame, and not all data can be used at the moment. We are still in an underdevelopmental phase for identifying what is the best cumulative data. Should we see it like a live table? Should we see it like when we reach the first live births? So these are all questions that we try to respond to have the cumulative data, and then also to have the relevant benchmarking. Because benchmarking can be different in different settings. If you have low numbers of cycles, some of the data could be irrelevant because you need a minimum data so that you can have a good interpretation of your average. And when the dashboards will be populated with more data in the future, that's what we hope, then we plan to send it to a broader audience to have a feedback on the user-friendliness of these dashboards and the completeness, and receive some suggestions for improvement. And now it is what you want to see. So what you want to see how it will look like. So this is the main page where you can see, I don't know if I have a pointer. Yes, you see it? Yes. You can see here the type of cycles that you can choose. And on the other side, the different steps of a treatment, ovarian stimulation, lab results, pregnancies from ART or IUI. And then here you have a button that you can click for the latest updates. And there it was decided that if there was not more than 80% of completeness, these latest updates will not be showed because it does not mean anything. And then you have the benchmark page where you can fine-tune based on, for instance, a size of a clinic or a size of number of cycles, the sample size. So this is the first page, which is the output and shows you all cycles, the cycles and the patients, the numbers, the total numbers. You have here a picture of the countries that are involved in the calculation of this. You have the cycles per cycle type, so the numbers and the proportions, and you can see the different cycle types here, IVF, FET, and so on. You have the numbers that are shown for a given period, and this is also shown on the x-axis. And then you can filter. You can filter by, for instance, the origin of sperm. Is it donor sperm or is it partner sperm, for instance? And then you have also what we call the shortcuts. So shortcuts means that you can swift from one page to another very quickly on some parameters that you have filtered out. This is the page for the ovarian stimulation, where again you have the same, which countries you have, what pre-treatment protocols were used, what LH suppression protocol was used, and you have the choice here, and you can see the proportions in the y-axis. The stimulation drugs, so was it gonadotropins, or was it oral agents or combinations? And then when you have injections of gonadotropins, from what was the origin? Then again, you can filter out and, for instance, choose all cycles and all data that came with donor sperm or with partner sperm. You can also see if it were only from fresh cycles, from fresh oocytes, or frozen. These are the lab results. So there again, you have the fixed parameters with here the fertilization rate that you can choose by type of insemination technique, so IVF, ICSI, or mixed. You have the embryo utilization per oocytes, also for every year and by type of insemination technique, and the embryo utilization per fertilized oocytes, again with different types of insemination techniques. And you have a funnel here that shows you when from where you are in a cumulus oocytes that are collected, and you go through the insemination, the fertilization, and the embryo to see what is your efficiency of your treatment. Again, the same filters can be possible. Is it donor sperm? Is it partner sperm? Same for oocytes, but also if it's fresh or frozen. And then you have the ART pregnancies. So here you have the fixed parameters that were chosen, clinical pregnancy per transfer, per embryo transferred for the implantation, and then the multiple pregnancy rates. And this is splitted by frozen embryo replacements or IVF ICSI, and again splitted for the day of the embryo development, which is a cleavage stage or a blastocyst stage. And there you can also have some splitting. It's true on all the dashboards. Splitting, for instance, what was the sperm collection method? Was it sperm from a testis or was it sperm from an ejaculation, for instance? And this is an example of benchmarking. So the aim is to benchmark you against what is possible. So here it's the different clinics that are benchmarked towards yourself in green here. And you have this at the different levels. So if you are a country, you can compare to other countries. If you are a clinic, you can compare to the clinics of your country, but only on averages. So it's not meant to have comparisons between clinics, but just to see if there is a way to improve the way you are working. And so, of course, now you have seen how it is populated, so we cannot interpret anything because there is not enough data for all the filters that are available, and so we cannot conclude on the data itself at this time, but we'll continue to collect data in the future. Of course, the centers, the national authority that have participated have logins, so they can have access to these dashboards. And later, in the future, the general public and the patients will also have access via an ESHRE web page once everything is finalized. And with this, I have also to thank all the WIPI5 members. So the WIPI5, to remind you, was the development of the IT tool, including the codes and the outcome parameters, the IT solution itself. So you can see that many people also worked in that work package, and I want to thank all of them, including ESHRE Office, that is not on these pictures, but that you have seen before. Ah, see, Veerle is there. The chief of the work package is there. So, thank you for your attention.
Okay, thanks a lot. Terrific presentation. I mean, it's really fantastic. I look forward to being able to play with that dashboard. It's great. Okay, so as anticipated, no questions because lunch is waiting for us.
That it's time to go on, otherwise we will be delayed, and some people here have to take some flights and so on, so I think it's good that everybody can participate in the discussions. And so I think we will have a quite tough afternoon because there comes into play the SO regulation, but before that we have EuMAR 2. And Jesper will talk a bit about that and the importance of these registries for in the context of the SO regulation. So Jesper.
Yes, thank you very much. Good that everyone is still in after the lunch. My task is to talk about EuMAR 2. And I heard that people said before the lunch break, you're a little bit pessimistic. I'm not. I'm realistic, and that's why I'm going to present you EuMAR 2. For I think it's the future, it's the way forward, it's in the long term the way we are going to address the way we're going to gather data in Europe. That will take some time, obviously, since we're not there yet. We have to start somewhere. That was EuMAR 1. We're going to close the chapter EuMAR 1. We're out of money. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. It was on the European Commission. Thank them for that. But from now onwards, we're on our own. But from what we have achieved, and I must say the dashboard look terrifically good. They're beautiful. The only way is a dashboard is as good as the data that are in it. And that's why we are going to make further steps, I would say. Let me see how we're going to do. All right. Yes. So we discussed within our team, and that is the ESHRE team. Thank them once more for everything they've done, but also within the people that were involved in the working packages to see. Is this the moment that we should stop, or is it a sound basis to go forward? And as said, we think it's a beautiful basis to build upon. And EuMAR, as such, was proposed as a 2-year extension of the project so far, which will be the coming years. And the aim is, as said here, it's the pilot project, which is was dealt with by Christian. I think it's a beautiful insight in the things that we encounter once we adopt EuMAR, with all the positive and also realistic things that come along. But to come to a pan-European sustainable cycle-by-cycle registry, that is the way forward, people, the only way forward. And I think that EuMAR can play a very important role in it. And we have to say here, as said, EuMAR will be entirely funded by ESHRE, no more EU funding. That gives us maybe more freedom, but less cash. So the aims are to refine the registry processes, since we encountered some difficulties, as already discussed, but also ensure credibility and value for the stakeholders. That's to show that actually what comes in, that everyone can benefit from it, and foster connectivity across the countries and the centers. So actually we can do some benchmarking, learn from each other, and give especially our patients insights in what's actually happening on a daily basis, so they can draw informed conclusions. And if we talk about the first aim, to refine the processes, you can see a slide here where we can further test the institutional cross-border data collection. I think the example of the donor I mentioned in my previous talk is an example that it's very important that we have a pan-European idea of what's happening. Whether it's donors, whether it's patients, etc., from a patient point of view, from other points of view, whether you talk about sustainability, whether you talk about whatever processes, we need to shed light on that to see that it's a safe process, to see where we can learn from each other. But that has to be within a GDPR compliance situation. We learned a lot as clinicians from the people from TimeLex. That's the company that advises us on legal matters. GDPR is obviously very important, but it's also, let's say, sometimes hampering the way that we try to learn from each other by sharing data. And we have to be very careful on that. And sometimes it seems that it's not helping, but we have found ways to do so by learning sometimes the hard way within the project. And we want to, since we have successfully conducted a pilot phase, we want now to go to an operational registry. And that can even be outside the EU, as said, since EU is no longer part of it. If we talk about the value that could come along with that idea, is that obviously high quality data collection and governance are of utmost importance. We need good data, otherwise we cannot do anything. We cannot have a sound discussion on comparisons, benchmarking, etc. So obviously the quality of the data needs to be discussed as well. Until now we had a lot of discussion on gathering the data, how do we get them actually in the environment, and what kind of switches and manual entries and other entries could help us with it. The next phase would be that we going to have a look at the data and do actually what I think all the clinicians want to do, compare and learn from each other, and to see why others do things differently, and to see that in a benchmark or otherwise would be, I think, the next step forward, especially if we could do that in a European way. The implementation of the updated parameters, obviously, if we didn't change that much, but we have to speak the same languages. So we're going to implement the updated parameters so that we can speak the same languages. And obviously, if that all leads to outputs for patients, clinics, etc., that is the way forward. And I think the last presentation before we went to lunch was a beautiful example where we can actually have an idea with dashboards what's going on in your own clinic, but also if you compare it to other clinics, countries, etc. I think it's a beautiful example from what we can do with the data. Talking about connectivity, we want to more or less come to a pilot 2.0, I would say, and connect more countries by the end of 2027. As such, we have to sell our product. in a way that we can promote registry benefits and continue to promote the engagement of the stakeholders. I'm glad you're all here, but a lot of people are not here. We have to engage them as well, especially in new countries. We saw we can welcome Poland and Greece. More than happy to visit, especially Greece once. But no, it's very nice that you're on board, and also these two countries are examples of the fact that the EuMAR family can grow, and as such will gain momentum and importance. And obviously, we need to develop a sustainability plan, integration with EIM, and potential external funding. Before the break, we already discussed that, and it was mentioned by one of the colleagues that in the end, EuMAR has to find a way to find other funding to make sure that it is sustainable. ASHRAE will pay for the next phase, but they are not be able to pay for it in the long run. So EuMAR forever means funding forever, not by ASHRAE. We have to find a way there. We have discussed this already. We have some ideas, but that is of utmost importance if you talk about EuMAR forever. The structure so far, if you look at the management, we got, again, a project management. It's similar to what we do now. We have to deal with communications, data registry, sustainability. In fact, it was all that I just mentioned. The presentations will be available online, so I will not read out all the lines, but yes, we have to deal with all these factors within EuMAR 2.0, obviously, as well. The governance structure, a lot of information here, but to put it briefly, it's similar to EuMAR 1, where we will work together within the steering committee. And I'm glad that a lot of colleagues still are willing to collaborate. So they're in the green of the previous slides of people that want to participate in the future. They want to participate in the future as well. Again, we need work packages. We will have to deal with a lot of issues that come along. Obviously, we need the subcontractors, the IT specialists as well. And on the lower side of the slide, especially the professionals, patients, policymakers, everyone has to be involved again. So it's similar to EuMAR 1. EuMAR 2 will be the next step, but a lot will stay the same, but we need to do it in a broader way. And as such, we need a broad recognition of the registry. And so I think we can, by the dissemination today, say that the pilot phase and the way we made the first steps were successful, and now we have to take it to the next level. And that will need a fully operational online platform. And at that time, it will be connected to 10 countries. Eventually, it has to be the way forward for the whole of Europe. But again, that will be in the future. Let's take small steps to keep it practical, to keep it in a way that it is feasible. Then a validated solution for the cumulative and cross-border data selection. Obviously, if 10 countries are involved, that means we cannot shed light on the whole of Europe, but we can shed some ideas on what's happening between these countries. The benchmarking tool will make sure that the centers can learn from each other, but also the patients can see what's happening. So I think a lot will happen. Other expected outcomes would be that we have a transparent and informed decision-making tool from the dashboards as shown, and you can learn a lot from them, and stakeholders can learn a lot from them as well. Data literacy, data awareness through the patient reports. I think it's of utmost importance, and I can't stress it enough, that it's of utmost importance that patients are empowered to gather data on what's happening, and that can take along this information in a standardized, good way. It sounds obvious in a lot of countries, but in others it's not so obvious, and I think EuMAR 2 can provide a tool to do so on a regular basis, and I think it's for the patients, and I'm here on behalf of them, of utmost importance. Again, sustainability and operational plans, we can have a lot of beautiful ideas thinking about how it should be done in the future, etc., but it should be feasible, and in the end, money is tightening, especially in the Netherlands with a new government coming up. We need to make it sustainable in a financial way as well, so that we can set up something that will be here forever. EuMAR forever, as Christian mentioned it. Something about the potential of the EuMAR registry. If we talk about changing in the future, we have to think about changing EU parameters as well. It's maybe a bit small to read from the back, but in the end, to summarize this slide, if new treatment modalities come up, it should be feasible that we adapt the parameters, the lists accordingly. So in the end, that we can change that, but not because one center wants their add-ons added to the system. No, it will be within the EuMAR 2 system that we can discuss these new parameters to eventually change the parameter list. Before the break, I tried to explain that it's quite tedious to come up with a first parameter list. To change that overnight would have major implications for the centers using the parameter list. So that will be a very let's say, prudent way to deal with that, but it's feasible. We thought about it, so we can adapt the system to the future. Again, something on that, you can read it in the slides that will be available afterwards. Again, we thought about it and we'll deal with it if something new comes up. Something about connectivity. It would be ideally, if I speak as a gynecologist doing obstetrics. Don't know whether a lot of colleagues still do their obstetrics, do everything. So from the patient that comes in with a desire to have a child until doing a cesarean, it's tiresome, but it's also beautiful to do. But it would be, I think, of utmost, but importance if we can shed some light on the whole process. That would mean, and Christian mentioned that we can tie together the registry on getting pregnant with the pregnancy as such, and eventually, of course, with the perinatal outcomes as well. So we can shed some light on the whole process. That means interconnectivity from other registries as well. We think about how to do so, obviously in a GDPR sound way, but it would be, I think, lovely to say from the first step until we have the perinatal outcome, what is the whole sequence of events that goes along with it, and say something about the steps that are involved. But that means linking these registries together. We think about it, how to do that actively. Then a point maybe the next speaker is going to address as well. EuMAR can help centers to think about their SOHO connection, etc. EuMAR will provide standardized reports for clinics to facilitate the submission of annual data, etc. So you can say what's happening in your clinic, etc. But we don't know how the SOHO platform or what things are involved. So we cannot promise here that it will be the way forward. So if you embark on EuMAR, that it will solve your SOHO issues. Obviously, it would be ideally to do so. If we could manage to play a role there, yes. It can definitely help centers to gain awareness on data registration and data output. But whether it's a one-by-one situation, it's difficult to tell. So obviously it would be helpful, as a practical doctor that if we're going to register one and we can have some output for several modalities and we don't need to do it once more, that would be ideal. But let's see what the future brings. So let's see whether we can help each other. But the next speaker will talk about EU regulatory affairs as well. And we're going to discuss all these things later, I think, Mrs. Chair.
So thank you, Jesper. So the discussion will be done afterwards, and it's now my pleasure to invite Rita Pitera from DG Santé to give us her view on the importance of registries in the SOHO regulation and the view of the Commission. Thank you for being here too.
Hello, good afternoon, and apologies for joining you so late. We are very interested to know how your project that is coming to an end and what are the outcomes of it. But I'm very glad that I managed to hear this last presentation, because indeed today we are not going to present you again all the legal requirements that come into force with the new regulation, but we tried really to make a link between what we see that EuMAR can assist the stakeholders and also the competent authorities in complying with the new requirements. So I will focus really in three main aspects that are new in the new regulation, and for these three aspects, you will see that in the end there are two things that we really hope that EuMAR can support the member states in achieving. So the first two concepts are the SOHO entities and the SOHO preparations. And starting with the SOHO entities, this is new because in the past directives we had tissue establishments that were obliged to comply with certain requirements, but now we have a broader group of entities that are SOHO entities that will need to be registered and also need to comply with a certain set of requirements. Then we have the traditional SOHO establishments that must be registered, authorized, and will be inspected, more or less like we have in the current directives. And we have still an additional subset of establishments that are importing SOHO within the Union. So this new definition brings to the scope of the regulation, we expect a very high number of organizations that were not previously obliged to comply with these requirements. This includes entities that only do donation or collection or even testing or quality control of the activities related with the SOHO activities. And also, very importantly, the human application. And we include also requirements related with the clinical outcome monitoring of recipients and also offspring of SOHO. So you see that we'll have a higher number of entities that need to be brought in, and for which we hope your societies also help to raise awareness on these new requirements. And we have here listed the general obligations of these entities. So you'll see in gray are the obligations that we expect to be limited to the organizations that will be classified as establishments. But in black, we can see that even an entity that is only doing human application of SOHO will also have to be registered, to have a responsible person, and most importantly, will have to collect data, report vigilance, do the vigilance reporting, and also comply with traceability and quality management. And the second concept that I would like to get your attention for is the concept of SOHO preparations. So we say now that establishments that process and storage and release SOHO need to be authorized also not only for their activities, but also for the preparations they are preparing. And there will be individual authorizations for these preparations. So entities need to be registered, establishments need to be authorized and inspected, and in addition, they need to request authorization for individual SOHO preparations. So the scenario in brief is more or less like this. In the present, establishments are authorized per activity and per SOHO category. So you can, for instance, be authorized to collect and process sperm. In the future, you will have authorization for each individual preparation that you will have. So from June next year, the SOHO platform that was mentioned before will be open to the public. And this means that establishments will be, all entities will be asked to register unless competent authorities decide that they will do it on behalf of their entities at national level. But establishments will be asked to enter in the, what we call preparation compendium, all the preparations for which they are currently working in their establishments. So we have this migration period from June next year until August 2027, where the idea is to gather, this is in the transitional articles, to put in the compendium everything that is being currently prepared in Europe. After August 2027, entity establishments will be asked to submit a preparation process dossier for each individual preparations that were not previously authorized before the transitional periods. And this new PPD, it's optional, but competent authorities from a majority of member states request to be also embedded in the functionalities of the SOHO platform. And will allow competent authorities to know if you are doing something very innovative in your establishment, if a similar process is being done somewhere else in Europe. And you will be requested, dependent, and we can move a bit forward, depending on the level of risk associated with the innovation, to submit also clinical clinical outcome data of the patients. So after 2027, this is the overview of the process on how to request authorization. The process starts with the systematic risk-benefit assessment, and where you will determine the risk associated with the preparation that you request authorization, and for which the threshold for this innovation is what is defined in the EDQM monographs. Okay, so based on this risk-benefit assessment and technical data, you will submit to the competent authorities all the validation data, all the studies that you did to prove quality, safety, and effectiveness when applicable. And when necessary, also a clinical outcome monitoring plan. So when there is not enough safety and efficacy data gathered, but you need to go to clinical practice to gather more data, you will submit to your competent authority also a clinical outcome monitoring plan. Then, based on the information that is provided, the competent authority may decide to grant full authorization, to refuse authorization, or in a third scenario, that is grant approval for you to go into this clinical study. Let's say that the clinical study for which the extent is proportional to the risk. And then once you gather this data, the competent authority will reassess again the data and confirm if you can be authorized, or if there is not enough quality and efficacy data, and the authorization will be refused. So here is where we expect EuMAR to help the professionals that are implementing these innovations, because we say that to gather this clinical outcome data, we recommend the use of registries, preferable registries established at European level. So you, when entering information about the SOHO preparation in the SOHO platform, will be requested to also do a summary on how you are doing the clinical evaluation of it. And you can also share data from other centers if needed, if they are doing the same therapy or the same innovation that you are. So here is, you may be familiar with this scheme. It says that if you are doing something for which the risk is negligible and it's pretty much aligned with the consolidated practices and therapies defined in the DQM, you will be required only to perform a serious adverse event monitoring. But when you increase the risk of your innovation, then you will be asked to have a more extensive clinical evaluation. So now we go to the SOHO platform that was mentioned before, that you still really don't know what it looks like and how EuMAR can coordinate with it. So the SOHO platform has several different modules, and these modules include all the requirements that were defined in the regulation and for which the Commission is currently working to implement. When I said that in June next year you will be invited to register your entities and also start entering in the compendium the preparations that you are currently preparing, I refer to these two circles that are in green and in orange. So these two modules will be available in June next year. The first module is basically the data, administrative data related with the activities that you perform in the entities, which SOHO categories, and also evaluation if you are a critical entity or not. And how do you relate with other SOHO entities? So if you receive tissues from other entities, or if you are distributing for a certain number of other entities, also if part of your activities is delegated in other entities. So we call a network of services from different SOHO entities. Then in the SOHO preparation module, in June, we have only this part of the module operational, because this is the PPD, and as mentioned, after August 2027, whenever you have a significant change in the preparation, you will have to fill the PPD. But in the first stage, we'll have the compendium. And in the compendium, then we foresee that this is also linked with the other modules of vigilance and supply and other functionalities of the SOHO platform. But the SOHO, the preparation compendium, sorry, can I move it? Is based on the information that was defined by other European initiatives, starting with GAP that defined how the PPD should be submitted. The compendium is an extract of this PPD, having the relevant information about the preparation. Has also reference and link to the monographs to enable you to define the level of novelty based on using the monographs as a threshold, and also uses the structure of a database that was defined by the EuroGTP project and aimed by then to characterize the different preparations prepared by the establishments. Some considerations. There are different levels of access for the information. So the entity and the competent authority have a full view of the information that is introduced in the compendium. Then the competent authority may choose to share part of the information with other competent authority from other member states if this is relevant based on the activities of the entity. And then there is a part that is public, and it's a part that is really the compendium, where we can see which entities in which member states are preparing certain types of preparations. Then the future, and we'll start only in 2027, we'll have the PPD functionalities that will be optional. And here is where EuMAR can be really significant, is that we also have information related to the extent of clinical and non-clinical validations and studies that were performed by the entities. And competent authorities are recommending the use of registries. So if the EuMAR registry is able to gather clinical outcome data related to a preparation that might be new, but may be done either by an individual entity or by several different entities at European level, we can use this data in a more robust way. The other aspect is that the data is meant to be introduced by the applicant and then validated by the competent authority. So there is a flow of communication that entities submit the data, competent authorities verify if it's correct, and once a competent authority considers that is correct, it becomes public and published in the SOHO platform. There are some competent authorities that wish to do this on behalf of the entities, but it will be possible, but the system is built in a way that aimed to be filled by the entities. Other aspect is that you will have different authorizations depending on the clinical indication, because you have one preparation, maybe for MAR is not so significant, but you can have, for instance, amniotic membrane to treat ocular pathologies, or amniotic membrane to treat burn patients, and then you will have two different authorizations for the same preparation. And this is a bit how it looks like. So we have the generic information about the preparation, where it relates, it says if it's something that is established in the monograph, or is something that is established in the monograph but not fully aligned, or it's something really completely new that has not been established in the DQM monograph before. And for this, it's a bit cut, but you see that you have a status of verified. So the competent authority in this example has verified that the information is correct. But then for one preparation, you have as many clinical indications as needed and as introduced by the entity. And for which one of them, for each one of them, you will have a different status of authorization. Finally, and we would like just to come to the second aspect for which we believe EuMAR can be very relevant. There is the vigilance reporting and the annual reporting. As you may know, the Article 41 established for all entities the obligation to report certain activity data, and this includes human application, collection, distribution. And when before, in the previous presentation, you were saying that you really don't know what data we will be requesting. It's true that the data sets are still being defined, but it's will be based mostly on the EDQM data sets. So if you look into the current EDQM data sets that are published in their website, you can see the level of information that will be requested. And because you see here in the considerations, because we foresee that will be thousands of entities that need to report into the platform, we also foresee the use of registries to assist the professionals in this task. Because we know that professionals has already a very significant workload when reporting for one registry. We would like to avoid that the reporting need to be duplicated to the SOHO platform. And for this reason, we have two different, or we will foresee two different ways to report into the SOHO platform. The first one is when the establishments on their own report directly in the SOHO platform, but then the data is revised by the competent authority, compiled in the annual report, and then submitted to the Commission that will publish the annual reports on behalf of the member states. But the second path for this reporting is that entities report directly to a registry, and then the registry compiles the information related with one entity, reports in the SOHO platform on behalf of the entity, and then the flow is the same. The competent authority, still before submitting to the Commission, will have a check if the completeness and correctness of the data before submitting to the Commission. So I think I covered the two aspects for which we consider that EuMAR can be really beneficial for the professionals and how it can help them to comply with the new requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita, for highlighting what is the future of this SOHO platform. So I will see if there are some people that are externally asking questions. At the moment, there are none, so I will give you the floor. But if I may launch the discussion, you said that you will rely on or evidence on SOHO preparations to validate some of these preparations. So, and that this could go through a validation process by the competent authority. But if we had information on SOHO preparations within our EuMAR registry, how would you foresee that a competent authority can validate evidence in the EuMAR registry? That's one question. And the second one is, because EuMAR is on a voluntary basis, because of the GDPR regulation that requires consent of a patient, how can you rely on a registry that cannot be comprehensive under this regulation?
So for the first question, EuMAR will be a tool, and as mentioned, it's not a mandatory tool, it's a tool that will be available for the professionals, and even the way that competent authorities then take the results of this tool is also up to the member states. But what we have is recommendations on the structured way to gather clinical outcome data, and we would advise professionals to use a registry that was developed by professionals and that considers the key clinical aspects that you should assess when you are developing an innovation. So indeed, when we say that EuMAR data can be used to provide to the competent authority clinical outcome data in a more structured way. It does not mean that is the only way that professionals will be asked, but it will be an added value if they say, okay, I'm doing the evaluation of my patients using a European registry, and I'm doing benchmarking, and I'm comparing myself with my peers. So this is an added value. It's in no way mandatory to use it, but it's something that we foresee that it's something valuable for the professionals that are developing innovation. The second question
about the value of such a registry under the GDPR regulation, which puts some huge barriers to the completeness of the registry. And also, if you foresee a registry of donors with what all is happening at the moment, how will we cope with such a regulation in that context?
The registry of donors at the moment is not it is inexistent, so it's not. I will not refer to that. But indeed, this is as any other clinical study. If your patients do not allow you to input the data in the registry, you would find alternative ways to show to your competent authority the outcome of this patient. I assume it's a clinical study. If they don't want to use the registry, again, it's not a mandatory tool to use.
Thank you. I will give to the floor.
Thank you, Rita. pleasure to have you here, and thank you for the opportunity to be present.
My pleasure.
Not getting back to the donor registration that you showed in the first slide or second slide, but again, the problem of giving responsibility only to the individual member states. In our field, we have lots of cross-border activity, and no individual country can cover that. We are struggling in EuMAR with very complicated codes to try to cope with the GDPR restrictions and at the same time to cover different countries. But, okay, my question is, would, because of the donor register problem and because of this, would EU face the possibility to have an umbrella mandatory binding information for individual countries to cope with this kind of registries?
Yeah. The idea of having a European donor registry, it's not new, and it's also not unique for MAR donors. We have other plasma donors, for instance, that for which we have been called to have this European registry. But until now, I cannot tell you that this will never happen, or that this will happen with the new, after the implementation of the regulation. It's indeed a need that has been identified also by the SOHO Coordination Board. They are currently discussing at the moment what can be done to have a better protection of the offspring and also the donors in some cases, because there are some donations of SOHO that the donors really need to be protected. But I cannot give you a straight answer on that, I'm sorry.
Forget the donors, and we are facing now the problem of the cross-border of patients that we cannot follow because, well, countries have not the same perspective in registries, and many countries have no registry yet. So we are struggling with difficulties, and we need your help.
For sure. We have a good experience with the European bone marrow transplant that exists for many years, and for which it were the professionals on their own that recognized the value of having this kind of registry. And we see EuMAR with the same evolution. But again, we cannot force member states. It's true that competent authorities may, and we expect in some member states, recommend the use of the European registry to have it in a more structured way, and to also to be able to compare with other centers. But these initiatives usually are not mandatory.
I know, but the blood marrow system and registry was before competent authorities. Now we have another obstacle in our field. But may I abuse just one question about SOHO, not preparations, because I'm completely unaware of what is a preparation, what level of meaning of preparation in our field. I was told that any small change, even cultural media change, would be seen as a new preparation. That will be a nightmare, but okay. But now, more general questions. We rely on labs of screening, analysis, just for our patients. Are they so establishments because of that?
If they are involved in the quality control, for instance, of the gametes?
No, just blood test, just hemogram, just...
No, the hemogram, no. It's only what is related with the quality and safety of SOHO. So...
Okay, that's good. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, Christian?
I have a question. I have spent all my professional life in a university-based center. So at regular intervals, we had an idea, we formulated the idea and submitted a study protocol to the ethics committee, carried out the study, and later on the study was published. If this study involved medication, the use of the medication had to be verified by pharmacovigilance as well. So what is the relationship to that protocol, a study-based protocol, an RCT, for example, randomized clinical trial, to the SOHO requirements?
Well, this is the first time that the SOHO is looking into the efficacy and really the outcome. So until now, and we have been challenged very often by our pharma colleagues saying that we never had a way in our regulation to determine if something was actually efficacious, because we never had clinical studies. So if you are dealing with exclusively SOHO, you will be following the SOHO regulation and you will be submitting exactly the same, not exactly the same thing, but adapted clinical study with an ethical committee approval and all the usual structure of a clinical trial to the SOHO competent authority.
As well, at the beginning of the study?
Yes, depending on the level of risk. If you are, for instance, changing media and the risk of what you are doing is very, very low, you will not be asked to do a clinical study. But if what you are doing is something that entails a moderate or a high level of risk, before going into clinical practice, you need to ask to the competent authority, based on the plan for your study, if you can proceed with the clinical application.
So that's basically doubling the step. So first you have the approval of the ethics committee and then again the approval of the...
Mm-hmm.
I'm good that I'm retired now.
Yes.
Maciej Śmiechowski, Fertility Europe. As a patient's representative, I definitely welcome the new possibilities that the SOHO regulation presents to us and new improved requirements to donor registries. We think it's very important for transparency, for traceability of genetic material, and this is particularly important for assisted reproductive technologies. Thank you.
I take note of that, and again, we are not saying that this will not be done at European level, but it will not be done until 2027, that is certain.
Yes, there is a question.
Thank you.
Hi.
Thank you for the presentation. So I am aware that the activity data set is still in the development. I know the EDICO-M set, but given that the new requirement is also for the member states to have the activity data report given to the Commission, I think that would be a great motivator to look into the EuMAR solutions. So is there maybe a possibility to speed up a little bit the activity data?
The activity data will be the activity data will be available early next year, if I'm not mistaken, because really it's the data set that already exists and defined by EDIQM. It's being revised to adapt to the terminology of the new regulation. And also because the glossary needs to be revised to ensure that all member states report exactly the same thing, but it will not take long. We'll not wait until 2027 to let you know what is the data set. And this is the work of one of the working groups of the SCB at the moment.
Okay, that's great. And as far as you know, working group does not see any major problems with the data set so far. Okay, thanks.
No.
So there are apparently still no questions from outside. Yes, Borit.
Thank you. Do you see from DG Santé maybe any connection or possibility to support EuMAR project not only in SOHO regulation but also in the European Health Data Space project, because it is just in these 6 months of pilot projects it was shown that more than 20,000 MAR cycles data was collected.
Indeed. Also for other aspects of the SOHO platform, we are being called to work in a way that will be compatible in the future. So it's in our plan to consider, at least. We are currently doing a study, a coherence study, and the limit communication between digital systems has also been raised as one of the significant barriers to get data, and it is indeed in our mind.
There were lots of questions this morning, but it's the good time to ask all what you want to know.
I have two questions. The first is if I'm allowed to ask questions about the previous session.
Are there no more questions than for this session before we step over to maybe another? Yes, Christina.
Okay, thank you, Rita. Nice overview. I just wanted to make a comment to both Carlos and Christian regarding the introduction of a new culture medium. I mean, I don't think that we have to be that scared about the concept of preparation, because it's us that, according to a tool that is available, that is the GAP, well described in the GAP joint action, the EuroGTP tool, etc., that we can evaluate the risk of introducing a new culture medium. If we release, I mean, if we go from culture media made by, I don't know, Vitrolife, just to say one name, to another culture media made by Cook, that are commercially available, I mean, the risk is practically negligible. So it's us that are going to evaluate the risk according to a protocol that is very well described. But the other point that I wanted to make a reference to your presentation is the EDQM guide. Well, first of all, in the new edition, the one that is coming to be released in a few months, we participated in the stakeholder review, and we're very happy that EuMAR is cited at least 3 times. One as a project supported by the European Commission, and then in other occasions as a system for cycle-by-cycle data collection. So this is first point, very much in favor of EuMAR. Also because the importance of EDQM guide with the new regulation is going to be very, very tough. My only comment is that I saw that you cited so many times the monographs. So according to the EDQM monographs, I have to say, and Shasti knows very well that it was really hard for us to write monographs, because monographs sounds like a good quality, I don't know, for example, for blood, I guess. If there is a good blood sampling, a good blood sample, according to what you have to treat, and a poor blood sample. For us, it's not. I mean, we have the quality sperm that the patient gives to us, and the oocytes that the patient gives to us. So we were obliged, Shasti, do you remember that, to write monographs, because otherwise, according to people at EDQM, we were not under a strict control, but this is not what really applies to our field.
No, but if you compare also the monographs of the blood guide with the monographs of the tissue guide, and if you compare the monographs of MAR with the monographs for bone, because for bone you have a grinded bone, powder bone, structural bone. You have, we understand the nature of the monograph is different, but it's important somewhere to have the minimal technical specifications of what is, and believe me that this is very important, what is considered a SOHO, and what is your threshold of what you are doing something different from there. But indeed, also the compendium, the level of information that you will be asked to introduce next year until 2027 is very high level. You will not be asked to introduce what kind of media you are using. In the future, indeed, if you do a change in your process and you have a certain level of risk associated, you will have to request authorization based on this and following the GAP methodology and the EuroGTP methodology. But we had to, like the EDQM colleague said, we have to have something to define what is the different kinds of preparation. Otherwise, we would not have a way to compare ourselves.
During the meeting, we've been discussing the nature of data reporting to EuMAR. So far, data reporting in many European countries, member states as well, has been voluntary. And we would we would like to have a mandatory reporting. Can everything that you told us today help us to move from a voluntary to a mandatory data registration in EuMAR? It's up to the member states, you said previously.
Yes, yeah. I cannot give you an answer. I will not say that in 10 years we do not all agree that this is a must. For now, what we say is that when you are doing something new, then you need to report. But we don't even say how you need to report. It's up to the competent authority of a member state to say this is sufficient data, or you must use a registry to be validated, but it's up to the member state. What we have now that we didn't have before is the SOHO Coordination Board that issues recommendations, and it's very useful because the whole regulation was brought in because we needed harmonization. So if the SCB has a recommendation that a registry should be used, member states still have ability to not follow, but it's a very strong recommendation. But I think we cannot make it mandatory just like that. Yeah.
So there are many escapes possible.
Yeah, let's hope that everyone wants transparency and wants to work well. The new regulation is already a big step forward for that, because until now we were not even looking at clinical data was not even a requirement, or knowing who is doing clinical application. We didn't know how many centers were doing it. So.
Maybe to add up on this question, and then probably we have to close the questions, but for the SAR exercise, this is mandatory data from the competent authorities to you. Mm-hmm. If you have no correct numerators and denominators because it's not mandatory, mm-hmm. you are still at the same place than now. Yeah. So how will you solve this issue? Do you think that there is something to put in place at the EU level and that could comply with all the different regulations? Or is this something that is not discussed at all, or how is it working?
It is being discussed, and the data set already aimed to be the minimum denominators, or the common denominators. And we have a working group on vigilance and traceability. There is defining a common approach on how to notify, what to notify, and how to gather certain data. And the idea is it's a huge work in different fronts, but it's to harmonize as much as possible and to provide people tools where they can really follow guidance on how to do things in a same way. Because in the end, we were talking before that the exchange between member states is huge in your reality, in the other SOHO as well, and we all want to speak the same language and to have the benchmarking and know who is working well. So this is the goal. We just started, but we have much more than what we had with the directive, that I can assure.
So for the moment, attention is paid towards a functioning, but not on the true data, if I can summarize. Because if you had no right numerators and no proper denominators, you can still not evaluate the real percentage of SAR that are happening. So that I have difficulties to understand that. I think finding a way of functioning and having an harmonized way to report, to notify, to confirm notifications is of course very good, but to my opinion, it's insufficient to have the real evidence of what's happening in the field. So I think this is maybe one question that could be brought to the right stakeholders.
Maybe, but we also have a we'll have a higher number of entities providing information, because until now, only the establishments were obliged to report. Now we'll have, hopefully, a clear view of the network of who is collecting, where are the donors, where are the establishments, and where is the clinical application. And clinical application, for instance, it's under the Article 41, also needs to be reported into the SOHO platform. So what I'm saying that we are starting to define the rules on how all this will happen, and there is also a big effort to inform the professionals that this is a new requirement for them, because I'm sure that many clinicians are still not aware that they need to start reporting on an annual basis. But we are aware of what we need, where we want to go, but it's a process. And I'm not saying that we will not pay attention to that, but it's just, cannot assure you that in the report of 2028 we already have perfect data, because everyone is reporting perfectly. It's a process.
Thank you for the clarification.
But again, if we all used a registry where the data is structured in a similar way, could be easier, but we cannot oblige them to do that.
Okay, so there are still no questions from outside. I think if there are no more questions in the audience. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Sorry. Thank you. Not a question really, but more like a concern perhaps with regards to looking into the future and the donation registry. So I understand how SOHO serves as an umbrella, and that needs to be in place, and that all needs to incorporate everything. But at the same time, I think, and to continue from the comment from Dr. Markley, the efforts to harmonize and to sort of have, if you like, a code for everything, I think the uniqueness of the field and things that do not apply to anything else, as it does in IVF, especially with regards to donation, I think perhaps the field is sort of perhaps not benefiting from that angle in a larger scale, apparently. So just these thoughts rather than a question.
Okay, thank you.
So maybe there was one question for the previous session also that we cannot forget.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, it's for the moderator, the question. I was wondering if you envisage how this dashboard can be used by researchers in this case. So you explained that there will be a formal request, ideally multiple people, not single PIs, but I think it's still very sensitive because the data come from different countries. So how do you envisage that people can use this data? So people from one country can use only the data from their own country, or there will be some permission from other countries? Yes, please.
So there is a whole procedure that has been described in a SOP on how it could work when a research question comes in. So there are different levels of evaluation of the requests. And of course, there is some hierarchy in if it's a multicentric study that requires an answer, or if it's only one center, and so on. So the relevance of the question will also be analyzed by a board. And at the end of the day, of course, there will be verification that this multicentric request has an ethical approval in the different entities or countries where it has been requested. So this is all described in a procedure that is already made to answer that. So I think that now everyone is calm, nobody has a burning question, so then it's my pleasure to give the word to Carlos, who will give us a final remarks about this exciting day. Thank you, Carlos.
Thank you, Christine. I'll be very brief. You are tired, and we have, all of us are overwhelmed with so much information. You could appreciate how complex EuMAR project is. You could appreciate the achievements and the difficulties of EuMAR 1, let's call like that, the project that is now ending, and to look at the future perspectives with all the difficulties, but at the same time, realistically expecting that Europe could finally have a proper registry. So just 2 slides. One, to again reinforce that we rely on the participation of competent authorities, professionals, and patients. So all our effort is towards transparency and towards information of all the stakeholders. Of course, I think, and it was already said, that EuMAR is a tool that empowers patients. They are some of the stakeholders that request information. Now we rely on their participation and collaboration. And I continue as a clinician to think that all our effort will need to be seen as a crucial contribution for improving clinical care of our patients. So those remarks are my final remarks. I just want to share to you our policy recommendations that you could read in the sheets that were outside. We have recommendations for the member states to improve equitable access to fertility care, collect MAR equality data, ensure national mandatory reporting from all clinics. But we have also recommendations for EU, for RITA, raise patients' awareness on MAR data, develop a legal framework for gamete donor registry, make cycle-by-cycle MAR registries mandatory, and of course we have individual countries that have already mandatory registries, but if the patients move to another country, we lose track completely. And for both EU and member states to provide dedicated funding for EuMAR reporting, otherwise the future will be difficult, even if we have plans to the future. So thank you very much, and I hope that the information was inspiring enough for you to participate in the next phases, not only EuMAR 2, but EuMAR Forever. That will be progressive work, of course. Thank you very much, and it was a great pleasure.